All right. Welcome you all to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Madera County Assessment Appeals Board, also known as the Board of Equalization. It's Thursday, December 6th, 2018, and it's 9:10 a.m. First thing is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have an item for public comment in the event that someone is here from the general public and wishes to address something which is under the jurisdiction of the board. We allow them to come up to the podium and do it at this time. I don't see anybody, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent calendar. And we have several items on the consent calendar. The minutes, looks like 3 withdrawals, excuse me, 2 withdrawals, and the approval of the Assessment Appeals Board meeting schedule for next year. I have no comment on any of them. Anyone else?
No.
No? Entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar. I second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, anybody who intends to testify in front of us today, we would ask them to stand and be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is hearing for Safeway Inc., 17R015. Mr. Austin, you want,
Yes.
excuse me, we have
Mike
somebody else
Austin
who's going to
for-
talk too, so.
Yeah, Mike Austin for the Assessor's Office.
Okay.
We'd like to, before we get into the hearings, we'd like to request and move number 7B up to now, so our attorney and attorneys for Constellation Brands can discuss their postponement hearings. That way that we can get that one done before we get into hearings. The hearings may be taken a couple hours, and I don't think it's necessary for our attorney or Constellation Brands attorney to sit here and listen to us discuss another issue, but it's up to the board.
So you're asking that we take item 7B and move it to the head of the hearings?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. That would, well, I guess one of the things, do we have an estimate of how much time 7B is going to take?
10 to 15 minutes?
10, 15 minutes. Let me ask, I see the gentleman here for the item 5A. Do you have any objection to us moving them in front for 10, 15 minutes? I can't quite hear you. If you could come over to the podium and speak over there. Identify yourself and
Brent Buskirk, agent for the applicant. Yeah, our hearing should probably take a couple of hours. So if there's anything that we can get out of the way that, it's only 10 or 15 minutes, we don't have a problem with that.
okay. All right. Well, do I need to do a motion on this, Michael, or not? No. Okay. Okay. We'll just, like I said, go ahead and do it. So we'll instead take up item 7B, discussion and consideration to postpone hearings scheduled for Constellation US operations, 95R27 and 96R100, which are scheduled to start next week.
Good morning, board members. I'm Troy Van Dongen on behalf of the applicant.
And Carolyn Frank on behalf of the assessor's office.
Michael, who do we let go first on this?
Well, since it's the applicant's request, I would have it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. As you may recall, when I was last here before you, maybe it was in the spring, I think it was, we were talking about the conclusion of lengthy litigation that involved the valuation of the Mission Bell Winery back in 1994. There was a change in ownership of that property in August of 1994, and there was never a supplemental assessment issued. There was a subsequent appeal of that 94 value that the board heard. We went through years of litigation, and then the courts finally decided that issue at the end of last year. And at that time, when I was here earlier this year, I mentioned that the base year value of that decision had not yet been implemented. And between that time and now, the county has implemented that decision, and they've implemented it in a way that the applicant believes is in conflict with the court's decision. The courts have decided basically the value of various categories of property, both the real property and the personal property. And the real property has a direct impact on the appeals that are coming up before you for 1995 and for 1996, because a base year value has been set. And the law states that when change in ownership occurs in the second half of the year, like here, that the 1994 base year value is, I mean, that exact value gets enrolled for 1995, and in subsequent years then it'll be inflated by 2% or whatever the inflation factor may be. We believe that that value has been enrolled improperly for 1994, and therefore it affects 1995 and will affect 1996 as well. And so that issue is now presently before the court. And the court will ultimately decide what is the proper classification for the base year value, or excuse me, the proper classification for the various categories of real property. And that necessarily will affect the values for 1995 and 1996. So it only makes sense that we get that issue resolved first before we start proceeding on to 1995. Because really, the issue for your hearing in 95, 1996, by and large, is what is the base year value for those 2 years. And if you decide something that is different than what the court decides ultimately for 1994, then we're going to have a conflict. And so we're asking you to postpone your hearing for a few months. This is not going to take years of litigation. This is an issue that we have an interest in getting resolved as quickly as possible. And we would like to get that resolved in a way that we can clear this up before you then have to implement the 1995, 1996 base year values. It only makes sense. We asked the court if the court would step in and stay the proceeding. And the court declined to step in. What the court said was that, if the AB properly does their job on the 13th, 14th, and 19th, they'll accept the court statement decision as affirmed by the Court of Appeals. So really what the court is saying is that it's going to deal with the 1994 issue, but it's leaving you guys to deal with the 1995, 1996 issue. And of course, if there's a difference in your determination and the court's determination, then we're going to have a conflict that we're going to have to deal with all over again, because you guys cannot go back and change your decision after you've made one. So in essence, we think it just makes sense from just a judicial or administrative efficiency perspective. We don't want to put on a case that is eventually going to be affected by the court's decision. And we're just asking for a reasonable postponement just until we get this issue resolved.
And Carolyn Frank for the Assessor's Office. We would oppose this request. They are completely separate issues. Their action that they have filed in the Superior Court alleges that the auditor for the county did not properly enroll the court's decision, and therefore the refund was calculated improperly. And that's fine, they can make those allegations, and that issue will proceed in the Superior Court. But nothing about that changes what we know is the base year value. The court already set the base year value. It was affirmed by the appellate court. That's where will be the starting point for this board when we get to the 1995 and 1996 hearings. Whether or not that has been appropriately implemented for 1994 and the calculation of that refund for 1994 has no bearing on what the value of the property is for 1995 and 1996. We see no reason to delay any more than this has already been delayed, and would argue we're ready for the hearings, let's move forward. Everyone has it on their calendar for next week and the week after. Let's move forward. We have the base year value. You will start with that base year value that the court has already set and can evaluate 95 and 96. And our contention is, regardless of what the Superior Court decides as to what the refund should or should not have been for 1994, there's no way to have an inconsistent ruling, because this board presumably will start with the base year value that the court has already established. And so there would be no chance of an inconsistent ruling. You would set a value for 95 and 96. The Superior Court can decide whether or not the refund for 1994 was processed correctly or incorrectly, and they'll run on their separate paths. That there's no chance of conflict in our view.
May I be heard of that, Chairman Minnie?
Go ahead.
I believe Cecil's counsel has fundamentally misunderstood the basis of our action in Superior Court. It is not a dispute about the refund dollars that were resulting from the original action. The action is about the allocation of the base year value to the various categories of real property. In essence, the court said that the real property should be valued at roughly $21.2 million. And real property at this particular facility consists of land, structures, fixtures, and trees and vines. And the dispute is that that $21 million was not allocated as the court had allocated it to those various categories of property. It's really not about how the refund amount was calculated or not. It's really the core issue for the court, and the core issue which is going to affect all those subsequent years really, is what is the proper base year value for the land at the subject property? What's the proper base year value for the structures? What's the proper base year value for the fixtures? And what's the proper base year value for the trees and vines? Those issues are going to directly affect 1995 because they are the same values. By law, the base year value set in the second half of the year is the base year value in the subsequent year. And then every year thereafter is just inflated by whatever the inflation factor may be, no more than 2%. So it necessarily will affect the subsequent years. And because this is really the issue that is before you for 1995 and you for 1996, it's very important that we have that issue resolved. Otherwise, I mean, there is this, what I see as a potential risk that your decision may be different than what the court's decision is on those various categories of property. And that those are key issues that will affect this, the assessment of this property for the next several years.
And I would just argue, we know exactly what the base year value is. The court has established it. And whether or not that value has been properly or improperly enrolled by the auditor doesn't change anything that this board will do. The only chance of an inconsistent ruling would be if this board, for some reason, disregarded the court order that we already have that has been affirmed by the appellate court, and for some reason departed from those values that have already been established. And I would argue we have no reason to believe that this board would do that. We have the court order. We expect that this board will look at the court order and abide by it. And that's, departing from that order is the only way that we would have an inconsistent ruling.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a few
Yeah, yeah.
clarifying questions? Mr. Bendoni, does the court decision that came down, does it break out the base value for each of those subcategories you just listed?
We believe it clearly states what those should be, what the court's decision would be. And these are documents that you and your client have been copied on. The court's decision basically says, it assigns a value to land, assigns a value to buildings. Buildings are basically structures for purposes of assessment. Assigns a value to building improvements. The term building improvements includes either structures or fixtures. We believe that it wouldn't have listed a separate line item for, two lines for structure, so that it's probably a fair reading to say whatever they said for building improvements is probably fixtures. Assigned no value at all to trees and vines. And then it assigned a value to personal property. So those are the categories that the court used. Now, the categories that are used for purposes of assessment they're different. For the real property, they're what I just said. They're land, structures, fixtures, trees and vines. And so there is different terminology between the two. But the personal property part is very clear. We know what personal property is. And what has occurred in the enrollment of the 1994 value is that the auditor, and we say the auditor, the reason why it's the auditor at this stage is because the auditor has the responsibility after there's been assessment appeals board hearing, that is the governmental entity that enrolls your decisions. So what occurred is that in interpreting the court's value for 1994 is, one is the value for the building improvements and for the buildings were put together, and there was no value at all assigned. Well, there was no adjustment, I should say, no adjustment for fixtures. So what basically has occurred is, although the court either assigned one value for fixtures, what the county has done is they have disregarded that assignment. And that's a core issue that is going to be affecting this year in 1995 and 1996.
For what's enrolled, does the court decision contain the information this board would need to move forward on 1995 and 1996?
Well, I think it does. I think it does. The issue is, though, that there's a dispute as to what that really means. And we think that the court's decision means one thing. The county has obviously interpreted it in another way. And whatever the resolution of that is going to affect the subsequent years.
So, Ms. Frank, do you agree with what Mr. Van Dongen just said?
What part of it? I agree that the court decision lays out the different classifications of property. I agree that there are some different terminology than what is normal terminology, but we think that you can follow it and move forward on that basis. We disagree that it has been enrolled improperly, but that is a separate issue to us as to whether or not how this board would move forward for 1995. The court decision has the information that this board needs to move forward to 1995 and 1996.
That was the point I was getting at. And it has all the information necessary to do that from the court decision?
We believe that it does.
And why, forget the enrollment. I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Frank. What's enrolled doesn't really matter to what we're trying to do here at this board. Does this board have the information it needs from that court decision to move forward with 1995 and 96?
Well, it doesn't have the interpretation of the 1994. So the reason, and I don't mean to quibble, but this is very important, is that the 1994 base year, if the county is right in their interpretation of the 1994 base year value, it'll come up with one figure. If we're right on the interpretation of the 1994 base year value, it'll come up with a different figure.
For what? What would the different figure relate to?
It'll relate to fixtures, for one thing. There's a significant difference.
So is there a difference in what the fixtures are under the court order?
There's no difference in the court order. I mean, the court order sets out values for different classifications of property. Is there potentially, are they arguing that there is a difference in how it's been enrolled? Yes, they're arguing there's a difference in how it's been enrolled. But we
Right.
have classifications of property laid out in the court order.
But what's been enrolled has no impact on 95, 96.
That's my contention.
And I've seen the court's order on Constellation's request, and all it says is their request is denied. Doesn't really explain it. Did you argue these points to the court?
Yes, I argued that it was, that they were separate issues, that whatever that in order to find in favor of Constellation, that court would have to assume that this board would improperly disregard the court order. The judge said that he was not going to assume that he was going to assume that this board could look at the court order and move forward to 1995, and that the court order from 2014 has everything that this board would need to move forward to 95 and 96, and that in that judge's opinion, there was no reason to stay the December proceedings pending resolution of these other issues in the Superior Court.
Okay. And is it the assessor's intention to challenge any of the information in the court's decision?
It
Or
is
to
not.
move forward from what it says?
The assessor intends to move forward from what the 2014 court order says.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from either side?
None.
I would just say that notwithstanding the comments from counsel, the assessor has not actually, the actions have not enrolled the court's order. And, I mean, we have the documents as to how it was enrolled, and it disregards fixtures. There's still $37 million of fixtures properly on the roll. That's a huge number that needs to be addressed before you start looking at it yourselves.
I think it's time to close the public portion of the hearing. My question, I guess, or excuse me, I have one more question. I had briefly asked Sarah to be prepared to talk about how we set up these hearings, and everybody agreed to the dates and all that. Can you speak to that, Sarah?
Everyone agreed via email to the dates for the hearings. There were no opposition.
Okay, so this is mutually agreed upon, these dates that are on
These
next
dates
week.
were all mutually agreed by both parties, yes.
Okay.
And that was, Chairman, I mean, that was before this most recent dispute arose.
Michael, my next question is, should we table this and then later adjourn to our room so we can discuss what we want to do on this?
Well, you could certainly do that if you like.
Yeah,
You have the,
yeah,
I think, even though the court denied
yeah.
Constellation's request,
Yeah.
I think you have the discretion to grant what they ask if you so choose.
Yeah.
It's up
Well,
to you.
Well,
But if you'd like to talk about
I
it
would
first-
rather we convene, with our regular closed session and figure out how we're going to handle this. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Any objection from the other board members? No?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you. We will let you know our decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving back to the item we skipped, which is Safeway. By the way, I see the next hearing's for bonds. Are you doing both of those, Safeway and bonds, or not? Yes, okay. All right. So with this, actually, we're discussing Safeway and bonds, but not Greenleaf Orchards. Okay, good. So these are items 17R015 and 17R016.
5A and 5B.
5A and 5B.
And the burden of proof is on the taxpayer, and so they go first. And one of the issues would be, and you'd have to ask the taxpayer's representative, are these going to be concurrent, or can we talk about both of these accounts at the same time, or how does he want to proceed?
We'll let you ask him questions, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you can also ask him questions, you know, mutually, so we don't miss anything. But Michael, were you in agreement with that the taxpayer speaks first?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that for the record, though, he should make it clear at the outset if he's intending to talk about both things at once or do one and then stop and do the second one.
Yeah, we would like to talk about both cases at the same time. It's the same set of issues for both locations, so just for efficiency, I think it'd be better to cover them both at the same time.
And the assessor's office agrees with that.
Okay.
At the podium, there is an oath. Can you sign that for me, please?
Thank you.
By the way, are either one of you going to give us a packet of information that wasn't included in the package that was posted on the website?
We may have additional information, but it'd be very minimal, because I believe our 1606
Yeah.
exchange shows everything that we need.
Okay.
So if it's okay, I'd like to pass out each exhibit individually as I'm ready to address them, unless the board has an objection to that.
Anybody have any objections? No, that's fine.
And as far as the question on additional information to be presented, I do have a couple pieces of rebuttal evidence, just in case it comes up, but that would probably be the only thing that you haven't seen yet.
Thank you.
Okay, so if everybody's ready, the first exhibit that we passed out here is Exhibit 1. It's our narrative for this case, so it'll give you an overview of the issues that we're going to talk about today. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll just kind of summarize it for you. Today we're talking about Vons and Safeway, but I'll just refer to it as Vons for the remainder of the hearing. Every year, Vons reports whatever equipment they have in use in the store to the county, and the county values that equipment based on the cost approach. So you'll see the property statements that are submitted by our client to the county in the coming exhibits, but basically what they do is they summarize all the equipment acquired for each year and the cost to acquire that equipment, and the county applies depreciation tables based on the classification of that equipment. Now, there is a standard guideline that's used by all the counties in the state to value grocery store equipment based on a 12-year average service life. Now, it's our opinion that this 12-year service life is too conservative in its depreciation allowed when computing the assessed value of each of these locations. It's our opinion that an 8-year table is more appropriate for this type of equipment. And the reasons for this is basically the market. We want to know, what does this equipment sell for when it's offered on the open market? We know how much Vons pays for the equipment when they put it into service, but once the equipment's used and they're done with it, we want to know how much can they sell it for after the fact. So we've done some studies based on the industry. We've done some studies based on Vons and their internal guidelines, how long they keep the equipment in use. And then we also have some opinions from experts in the industry that we'll be presenting later. So if you look on page 3 of our narrative, you'll see our final opinion of value for both locations. It's around 1.8 million total. So with that, I'll go ahead and start with Exhibit 2. Should I go ahead and pass these out, or I'm not sure how that works? All right, so what you'll see here in Exhibit 2 is we've collected various industry articles. They all talk about the typical life cycle of this type of equipment, and it talks about the remodel schedule for these types of stores. Pretty much all the opinions agree in these articles that these stores are typically remodeled, and the equipment is typically turned over every 5 to 10 years on average, which is well below the 12-year average that the assessor's office is using. One of the main drivers for this cycle is competition. Each of these stores, Vons being one of the upper tier stores, they're not you wouldn't think of them being competitors with smaller convenience stores or liquor stores, things like that. They have the more advanced technology. They have the better decor in the store. So when it comes to their competitors out there, they're constantly trying to outshine each other. Another factor that goes into it is they need to satisfy consumer tastes. So if you remember, not so long ago, some of these stores, they offered things like dry cleaning, or they offered 1-hour photo. Those things aren't there anymore because consumers don't want them anymore. Now you'll see things like self-checkout, which wasn't always there. You'll even see some of the newer stores like the Amazon grocery stores where there's no checkout. You just walk into the store, they have computers that know exactly what you're buying, and then you walk out of the store. So the technology is constantly changing, and when the competitors have that type of technology, these stores, they need to try to match that. So if we can go ahead and just, I'll summarize each of these articles as we go along, starting on page 1. It's a report from the Food Marketing Institute. So the first couple of pages of this, it's just the cover page to the publication, but the information starts on page 4. You'll see there's a highlighted section at the top of the page there that says fresh foods from deli to produce is expected to gain more space allocation to serve as a competitive differentiator. So one of the biggest cost components of the equipment that's in these stores is refrigeration. Things are kept refrigerated and frozen. So with fresh foods being something that consumers want more and more of now these days, it's the opinion of the Food Marketing Institute that will be taking over more of the space allocation in the store. So there would be less of a refrigerated section. When there's less demand for that type of equipment, the value is going to be driven down. Next on page 5, there's another highlighted section that says decisions on retail space allocations are good indicators of growth directions. Not surprisingly, fresh food segments are being tapped for bigger space allocations in the next 2 years, given that shoppers continue to gravitate towards these categories. Then it just gives some numbers on that. So basically what this is saying is that consumer tastes are changing, and the stores, they'll have to evolve. They'll have to change their store layout, the equipment that they put into use to satisfy those needs that their consumers have. And on page 6, we have another publication. This is also from the Food Marketing Institute. And just so you know, that previous article was it was based on 2017 trends, calendar year 2017. So on page 7 of the next article, there's the highlighted section at the top that says, today's shoppers, armed with new technologies and shifting personal needs and aspirations, are seeking entirely new solutions from the stores they shop. So again, the stores need to adapt to what their consumers want, and a lot of these wants that their consumers have, they don't last 12 years, 15 years. They're constantly changing. You'll see things like coffee shops. You'll see fresh food services in these stores that weren't there 10 to 15 years ago. Page 8. It says the pace of change that is disrupting food retail is exponential rather than linear, and reflects a combination of mind-blowing technological innovation, shifting consumer preferences, and an increasingly networked global population. So oftentimes this technology is changing faster than some can keep up with. Page 9. As many other big box formats have found, consumers are losing patience with shopping the traditional large footprint grocery whose value proposition is based exclusively on having a large selection of products in the center store. And the increasingly connected, networked, and social world that consumers now inhabit, the shopping experience goes far beyond the four walls of the store, further decreasing the food retailer's ability to orchestrate and influence the overall customer experience. These new realities of the food shopping experience are here, as evidenced in a recent Kurt Salmon study that revealed that over 67% of respondents already use the internet for grocery shopping research, and 25% are already ordering grocery products online. We expect that the once dominant value proposition of the traditional supermarket will be impacted significantly by these forces. So basically what this is saying is that going into a grocery store to buy your own groceries is going to become a thing of the past eventually. So any of the equipment that you're going to be seeing in the store, it may not be in use 5 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Page 10. As food retail footprints continue to shrink thanks to the declining relevance of the center store, traditional grocers are faced with oversized real estate and new overhead implications. So again, just saying that the grocery store itself is slowly becoming obsolete. On page 12, we have another article from MarketWatch. There in the middle of the page, it says, "It is a necessity of new generation grocery stores to constantly look for and adopt advanced and more efficient commercial refrigeration equipment systems." So this is another one of the reasons why we're requesting an 8-year table for this type of equipment. Refrigeration being one of the largest components of the cost that goes into each of these stores, it needs to be updated all the time. There's constantly new government regulations for efficiency. This equipment, it probably suffers the most physical obsolescence just due to the foot traffic in the stores. Customers leaving doors open, requiring the machines to work harder to keep the food cold. And there's really stringent regulations on the temperature control for this equipment. So if it's not functioning properly, they can get hit by fines and penalties by the regulating authorities. Page 14. It's another writer's opinion, just saying that the stores should be remodeled every 5 to 10 years. These remodels include replacement of old equipment, replacement of old decor. So every 5 to 10 years, it's basically a new store. And again, this is far less than the 12-year service life that the assessor has in place for this type of equipment. Page 18. This is an article that deals with energy efficiency from a few years ago. And it says, "The Energy Department today rolled out new energy efficiency standards to make commercial refrigeration equipment in grocery and convenience stores about 30% more efficient, providing another bump for President Obama's climate action plan." And below that, the new commercial refrigeration rules update standards from 2009 and will save businesses up to $11.7 billion on their energy bills over the next 3 decades, DOE said. The rules will take effect in 2017. So as you can see, they had one set of standards in 2009. This article came out in 2014, 5 years later, and it says that the rules will take effect in 2017, 3 years after that. Again, less than the 12-year average service life that's being used right now for this equipment. Page 19, we have another publication from the Food Marketing Institute. It's a little bit older, but the facts are still relevant today. And this is a publication about store development, just all the components that go into that. On page 22, it talks about the number of years between remodels for different types of stores. So the first highlighted section is for stores in the West region, which would include all the Vons and Safeway stores. It says that the years in between remodels is typically 10. For companies that have more than 100 stores, it shows that the years between remodels is 7. For chains of 101 or more stores is 7. And then for companies with annual sales of more than $1 billion, it's about 7.5. So all these categories that Vons fits into, it ranges from 7.5 to 10 years on average between the remodels. Page 23 is an article from the Daily Gazette in New York. Right there in the middle of the page, retailers typically remodel their stores every 7 to 10 years. Page 25 is an article that talks about the competition in this industry. So starting on page 25, it says, if anything, store remodels are more popular than ever as retailers strive to get the most bang for their capital improvement buck and outshine competitors. So that's important to note, that they're trying to outshine their competitors, because if any of the equipment that's being used in a Vons or Safeway store is offered for sale in the open market, their competitors aren't the ones that are going to buy it. They're trying to outshine each other. So when this equipment is actually sold out there, it's going to the lower level stores. It's going to convenience stores. It's going to liquor stores, and they're not going to pay top dollar for this type of equipment. They just don't have the funds for it. Page 26. It says stores remodel for countless reasons, but most boil down to competition. When a competitor has a fresher concept, introduces an expanded deli, or enters a market for the first time, existing stores often decide a renovation is a competitive necessity. If the existing store is aging, the retailer's desire to renovate in the face of new competition is even stronger. Page 27. It says 99 times out of 100, the impetus to remodel is going to be competition. So again, just reiterating the fact that these stores are competing with each other, they're trying to outdo each other, and they're not going to be buying each other's used equipment. Page 32, at the top of the page. It says competitors can determine a renovation's lifespan. In areas with little competition, a renovation will remain fresh for much longer than in areas where competitors are frequently updating their looks. Metropolitan Market in downtown Seattle tends to remodel every 3 years. Stores out from the city will do a minor remodel every 5 years and a full remodel every 10 years. On page 35. This is an article that mentions Publix grocery stores. On page 36, there's a highlighted section that says, Publix corporate offices told me, not me personally, but the author of this article, that the company remodels stores every 5 years. And then on that page, you'll see a couple pictures of a Publix grocery store, and it's pretty similar to what you would see in a Vons store. Now, if we turn to page 38, we have a section taken from Marshall and Swift Valuation Service, and this is their life expectancy guidelines. And Marshall and Swift, it's used by both assessors' offices and agents like myself. But here you'll see there's a highlighted section on the right-hand side of the page for retail trades, fixtures, and equipment. And it's a little bit vague. It doesn't say what type of retail. I would imagine it includes more than just grocery stores. It's probably clothing retail, sports retail, things like that. But they do have a range between 7 and 11 years. If we go to page 45, it's an article about the CEO of Safeway. It starts on 45, but the highlighted part is on page 46. It says the Pleasanton grocer is also embarking on remodeling initiatives that will upgrade offerings and upscale locations and overhaul the center of the store offerings, which were pretty much left unchanged in the company's much larger lifestyle remodeling focus on produce, meat, and other departments found along the perimeter of the store. Safeway has completed 14 of 270 store remodelings planned for this year that are focused on center of the store renovations that include tying in the pharmacy to over-the-counter medications and other products involving family health. And then the last paragraph says Safeway expects to complete half of its 300 premium store remodels this year. And this article is from 2013. The effort includes expanding the offering of products that are organic, locally sourced, or unique. Essentially, Safeway is stocking more premium offerings in locations that have populations likely to opt for a Whole Foods Market and other upscale competitors. Okay, page 49. It's an article that talks about refrigeration maintenance and the importance of it. At the top, it says improper maintenance of refrigeration units can lead to an array of problems for supermarkets, so management needs to put a special emphasis on this asset class to ensure that customers are satisfied, costs are contained, and regulatory guidelines are adhered to. Starting on page 51, we have another article talking about renovations. So it starts on 51, but we're going to focus on page 53. It says shopping behaviors are changing very quickly, and store layout, space, and assortment levels have not kept up with consumer needs. There's an opportunity to shift funding from traditional store remodels to a lower cost refresh approach and significantly improve your ROI. And below that, most retailers today are still on a 7 to 10 year remodel schedule. So even being on a 7 to 10 year remodel schedule may not be enough. Page 56. It's from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. At the bottom of the page, they say in the supermarket industry, remodeling occurs on average every 7 years. And then on page 57 and 58, this is a white paper from a refrigeration manufacturer. On page 58, in the middle of the page, it says the number of new and remodeled supermarkets in the United States is being driven by consumer trends toward increased freshness and convenience. Various industry sources show a typical remodel cycle of 7 to 10 years. Over half of store remodels were as a result of company policy. In 2005, nearly 1,000 new stores opened and another 1,500 existing stores were remodeled. And down at the bottom, the average life of a refrigeration system is 15 years. However, supermarket refrigeration systems are overhauled every 8 years on average, which coincides with the typical store remodel cycle. So even though the equipment may last 15 years, it's overhauled every 8 years. So essentially after 8 years, it's a brand new machine. Then we can move on to Exhibit 3. So with Exhibit 3, we'll get into the more technical aspect of this case, which pertains to the R3 curve. It's part of the Iowa curves that are used to develop the depreciation factors that are used by every county in the state. So on page 2, We'll start off with a few definitions before we get into the Iowa curves. In the middle of the page there, it talks about average service life, or says it can be estimated by an appraiser based on a mortality study of individual acquisitions and retirements, historical usage of property, useful life expectancy as reflected by the applicable industry, or other information available. And below that, any percent good table or depreciation schedule, including those published by the board, should be used only as a guide in the estimation of value. They may reflect more or less depreciation than the actual market indicates. I don't think I mentioned it, but this excerpt is from Assessor's Handbook 504. Then on page 3, talks about physical life, which differs from average service life. It says physical life or age is the time the equipment has existed. So physical life, if something is 15 years old, then its physical life is 15 years. And average service life is how long, on average, a group of items is in service. And here we go. On page 4, also from Assessor's Handbook 504, it says average service life is the average life term of a group of items, whereas physical life typically pertains to just one item. Page 5, economic life, says it's the useful or profitable life of property, which may be shorter than the physical life. In pages 6 and 7, we'll see a definition from valuing machinery and equipment from the American Society of Appraisers. Page 7, down at the bottom. It says physical life is the estimated number of years that a new property will physically endure before it deteriorates or fatigues to an unusable condition purely from physical causes, without considering the possibility of earlier retirement due to functional or economic obsolescence. So now starting on page 8, now we've got the definitions out of the way, we'll start talking about the Iowa curves and how they pertain to the trend factors that are used. So on page 9, you'll see a graph there in the middle of the page. This is a representation of the 3 different types of curves that were developed as a part of the Iowa State study. So what this is back in the 30s, I believe, Iowa State University conducted a study on different types of industrial equipment, and they developed trends on retirement patterns for this equipment. And they developed these 3 sets of curves. So we have the curves, the L curve, S curve, and R curve. But for purposes of this case, we'll only discuss the R curve because that's what's used to calculate these trend factors. So what the R curve says is that the highest frequency of retirements happens after the average service life has already been achieved. So if we have an average service life of 12 years, which is the guideline for this type of equipment, the R curve says that we're going to see the highest frequency of retirements after we've already reached 12 years. And it's usually about 110 to maybe 115% of the average service life. So if we're looking at 12 years, we'll see the highest frequency of retirements at maybe 14 or 15 years. On page 11, you'll see how the R curve is actually broken down into additional subcategories. So there's 3 main sets of curves, like I said, the L, R, and S, and each of those is broken down further. So the R curve is actually broken down into 5 additional curves. But for the trend factors that the county uses, and the factors that have been adopted by the Board of Equalization, they focus on the R3 curve, which is highlighted there for you. And you can see there's the red vertical line there. That's the average service life. If you go down to the horizontal axis on that graph, you'll see it's at 100% of the average service life. And the peak of that curve is where we see the highest frequency of retirements. So the curves that you see here, that's the frequency of retirements along each year that the items are in service. And as you can see, the highest frequency happens after we've already reached 100% of the average service life. On page 12, talks about the scope of the Iowa curves. It says the 18 curves published by Iowa State University cover the full spectrum of typical variations in retirement patterns. These curves range from sets where the greatest number of retirements are early in life to sets where the most frequent retirements are late in life, and from sets with low retirement frequencies in the modal year to sets with high modal year frequencies. And the modal year is the year where we see the highest frequency of retirements. The curves contain the necessary relationships to compute percent good tables, namely average service life, probable total life expectancy at all ages, and retirement frequencies. To compute a table for a particular property type, the appraiser must consider the retirement pattern of the property in question and select the curve that most nearly fits this pattern. Now we have pages, let's see, 13 through 22. It's a little bit redundant. I can go ahead and just summarize it for you. All these pages say is that the R3 curve out of the 5 R curves is the one that's used to calculate these trend factors. I'm going to go over each one I can, but I think that just for efficiency, we can probably skip over that. Starting on page 23, we have a publication called Intellectual Property. And we've taken Appendix C from this publication, which deals with the what they call the use and abuse of Iowa curves. So on page 25, in the middle of the page, it says Iowa type survivor curves are based on a set of empirical data collected mainly in the 1930s for the purpose of statistically predicting future service expectancy or remaining service for physical properties. Page 26. It just states the 4 main categories that went into the development of these curves. What they looked at was retirement patterns, average service life, average remaining life, and condition percent. So if we go to page 30, you'll see a couple of graphs there. So the graph on the bottom of the page is the one that we already saw from the Assessor's Handbook, which illustrates the retirement frequency of these items. But the graph above that's a little bit different. So it uses the same data. It's just the curves are represented in a different way. So in this case, what it does is it tells us at what point in the life cycle. Well, let me rephrase that. It tells us how much of the equipment is surviving at each point in the life cycle. So you can see all the curves. There's the 5 curves there. They all meet together at 100% of the average service life. And the point where they meet, you'll see there's a red horizontal line there that goes out to about 54%. Now, what that percentage represents is the amount of equipment that's surviving at 100% of the average service life. So what this says is if we have a 12-year average service life, we should expect to see 54% of the equipment there, the equipment cost. If we have an 8-year average service life, which is what we're petitioning for, you should see 54% of the equipment there, and so on. On page 33. It says, perhaps the most unfortunate consequence of the dogmatic use of Iowa-type curves to quantify appraisal depreciation is that they often substitute cookbook appraisal procedures for in-depth specific knowledge of the property under investigation. Many appraisers are unaware of the myriad assumptions associated with the formalistic application of Iowa curves. So what this says is one of the problems with using the trend factors or depreciation factors based on the Iowa curves is that it may not account for all types of depreciation. There's economic depreciation or economic obsolescence, physical depreciation, and then there's also functional In most cases with grocery store equipment, we're focused on the functional and physical obsolescence. Page 34. It says, no unique Iowa curve will faithfully predict for a specific group of assets, service life, remaining life, and the concomitant condition percent. Below that, appraisers who dogmatically apply a specific curve shape and life from the available family of Iowa curves are ignoring the variations. The appropriate procedure would be to perform a life analysis of the specific group of assets under investigation and ascertain which, if any, specific Iowa type curve is applicable. So again, there's other factors that go into it besides just developing the curves. So although based on our research, we believe that an 8-year table should be used, it's very possible, we think it's actually likely that an 8-year table is still too conservative for purposes of valuing this type of property. Page 37. It says, in other words, there is no substitute for the actual study of the property under investigation, application of market supplied information results and appraisal values that can withstand scrutiny. So you'll see in the coming exhibits we did our own study we've done the retirement patterns of Vaughn's equipment just in Madera County. We've looked at Northern California, Southern California, and then all across the state. That'll actually be the next exhibit. But before we get there, page 38 is the final part of this exhibit, where you can actually see a chart of the coordinates for the graphs that we looked at before. And you'll see those coordinates on page 39. So there in the far left-hand column, you'll see highlighted 100, which is 100% of the average service life. And then if you just scroll your finger over to the right side of the page, percent surviving is roughly 54%. So when you look at our study, when we performed our study, we wanted to see at what point did we find 54% of the equipment, because that would tell us what the average service life should be, or what 100% of the average service life should be. So again, referring back to our previous exhibit, what we're looking for is 54%. Where do we find 54% of the equipment cost? The numbers won't be exact. We're looking kind of for a reasonable deviation from this 54%. But let's just go ahead and get into it. You'll see there's 4 sets of data there. You'll see all California locations, which represents close to 400 different locations throughout the state. To the right of that, you'll see just locations in Madera County. And then below that, you'll see the Northern California region and the Southern California region. So the purpose of looking at 4 different sets of data was because if we looked at just Madera County, we're only looking at 2 locations. If we took the numbers from just these 2 locations, it could heavily skew the numbers either, really high or really low in our favor or in the assessor's favor. So we wanted to look at the company as a whole. Looking at roughly 400 locations, we thought was a pretty good sample size to use. So this set of data refers to the 2017 lien date. And then if we, as we go along this exhibit, we took the data going all the way back to 2010. So you'll see a pattern here, or a trend. So for all California locations, you'll see highlighted at 10 years of age in the left column, and then in the far right column, you'll see that accounts for 54% of the equipment costs. And for each of these sets of data, you'll see the 12-year is also highlighted, which is what the assessor's office has been using. So for all of California in 2017, we found 54% at 10 years. For just Madera County, that was somewhere between 11 and 12 years. For Northern California, it's somewhere between 9 and 10 years. And then for Southern California, it's right around 10 years. And then just for your reference, Southern California deals typically with stores that are south or from Kern County down to San Diego. And then Northern California is everything north of Kern County. Now if we turn to page 2, you'll see the numbers didn't really change a whole lot for Madera County. For all of California, again, it's somewhere between 9 and 10 years. Northern California, it's about 9 years. Southern California, about 9 or 10 years. So again, it approaches that 12-year mark, but it never reaches it. Go back to 2015. You see the numbers get a little bit higher again. So for all of California, it's somewhere between 8 and 9 years. For Madera, it's around 10 years. Northern California, between 8 and 9 years. Southern California, around 9 years. You can see the same trend continues all the way back to 2010. So we looked at 8 different years, 8 different lien dates, and we see that through all of these lien dates, we never see 54% of the equipment costs based on the R3 curve. We never see it reaching 12 years. In 2010, on the last page, you'll see it's somewhere around 4 to 5 years. So starting in 2010, going all the way to 2017, we see a range of between 5 and 10 years, which is what the industry tells us. That's what all the industry articles told us, that the average life cycle, the equipment being turned over, and the stores being remodeled, it falls on a schedule between 5 and 10 years. And we believe that using an 8-year table is reasonable. So with Exhibit 5, this is just our opinion of value, just showing where all the numbers come from, how they all reconcile with each other. Page 1, you'll see a summary of the 2 locations that we're hearing today. Each column is labeled. You'll see the assessment number, you'll see the appeal number, you'll see the costs reported for each location. You'll see the applicant's costs. So I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The roll cost is not the cost that's reported, it's actually the cost that was enrolled by the county. And that differs from the applicant's cost, which is what we have in our fixed assets and what we reported for each location. So there's a slight difference there. Then the next 4 columns is the allocation of values, the allocation of the roll values. So you'll see the allocation to structure, personal property, and fixtures, and then the total value which is the roll value for each location. And then the following 4 columns is the allocation based on our opinion. So the assessor's roll value is based on the 12-year table, and then our opinion value is based on the 8-year table. And then you'll see a total value from the assessor of roughly $2.5 million, and then our opinion of value is roughly $1.8 million. And then you'll see on the following pages where all these numbers came from. So on page 2, you'll see the tax bill for store 2409, which is application 17-R016. So you just see the values there, and that's where we pulled them from. And then starting on page 3, you'll see the annual property statement that Vaughn submits to the county. So page 3 is just the first page, which is a summary of the property statement. And then the following pages after that, you'll see how everything gets broken out. You'll see the different categories they report, the different years of acquisition that they report for. And then what the county does is they take each of these categories and they apply a different depreciation table based on the category. So the far left column there, you'll see the calendar year of acquisition. And then that first category is the machinery and equipment, which is the store equipment, makes up the vast majority of the costs that are reported. And then this is the equipment that we're contesting that's being valued on a 12-year table. The property statement continues until page 20. And then on page 21, you'll see how the values were computed. So what we did was we took the values that are, or the costs that are being enrolled by the county, and we computed a value based on the tables that they used. And then we also did the same thing to calculate our opinion of value. So you'll see a couple of, or there's 4 bigger sets of data there down in the middle of the page. The top left set of information is the store equipment. So if you look at the tops of each column, you'll see the value per roll, and then you'll also see the applicant's opinion of value. And then for each of those, you'll find the cost reported by year, the trend factor for that year, and the calculated value. Okay, now this is strictly based on trend factors, okay? We believe that the best market indicator would be to find out exactly how much this stuff sells for. If Vaughn's wanted to close down a store, they wanted to sell all their equipment, how much would somebody actually pay for it? But these numbers are based on the average service life of the equipment, which we saw before, and the corresponding trend factors that go with that average service life. So for the store equipment, and then down on the bottom right, you'll see the signs category. Those are the 2 categories that we're contesting today. There's several other categories. We have telephones, we have shopping carts, point of sale equipment. We're not contesting any of that. We're only contesting the store equipment and signage because this is the equipment that's typically turned over on a much more aggressive schedule than what's being used for the roll value. And then on page 23, it's the same set of information for the other store that we're looking at today. The only difference with this location is in the costs that are being picked up. So if we go to page 42, you'll see our valuation for this location. I know the print's a little bit small, but if you look at the top of the page, the first little chart of information there.
Excuse me, what
Yes.
page are you on?
42.
42?
Yeah, 42.
Okay.
Is everybody there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So at the top of the page, you'll see the first chart of information that lists the equipment costs and the supplies for this location. Okay, now we have listed the equipment cost that's on the roll, and then we have the equipment cost that we actually have on the books. And for some reason, these numbers differ. The equipment costs per applicant, which is the furthest right column there, it's a little bit lower than what the county has on the roll. And that number in the right-hand column is actually what we reported. And you'll see the difference in the store equipment category. So if you look at the four larger charts down below, the top left one says store equipment. So under the section that says value per roll, the cost for that was a little bit over $2 million. And then under applicant's opinion, the cost is about 1.9. So it's a little bit over $100,000 difference there, and we're not quite sure where that came from. We'll also see a difference in the telephone category, which is to the right of that. See a difference in the shopping carts, which is down at the bottom left. So you see there's some differences in the costs. Like I said, we're not sure where they came from, possibly, or maybe that'll be explained by the assessor when they present their case. So next we can move on to Exhibit 6.
How much longer do you have to go?
Maybe a half hour, 45 minutes?
I was thinking we probably need to just have a short break.
Okay, that's fine.
If we could take a 15-minute break and, pick it up where you left off.
Sounds good.
Okay.
There's a little spot right
Yeah,
there,
I saw
too.
that after I
Okay.
watched the first one.
Just want to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. you have a good Thanksgiving? That can be good too. Kind of that.
Okay, I did get news that my son is going to get married on April 20th.
Oh, good. Where's he gonna get married?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
He just gave me the date.
yeah. We have, my oldest grandson's getting married, and we didn't know the time or place anywhere, and he flies all over the world for work anyway, and, anyway, we did find out it's the 17th in Nashville.
Oh,
17th of May, excuse me. in Nashville.
May.
Yeah.
He gave me slightly more warning.
Yes. Well, we're just glad he let us know. All of the whole family, yes. Yeah.
Well, they keep changing their mind on the menu, so I think that was part of the problem. This is Sarah. Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, sir.
Which is 8 years later.
I think we're good. Okay. All right, so the next exhibit is Exhibit 6, and it's just, actually for your reference, it's the fixed asset detail. So you can see where the numbers actually came from, the numbers that are reported to the county, and then the numbers that we used to form our own opinion of value. Now, we don't have to go through this whole thing. There's 17 pages worth of this stuff. But you can just kind of get an idea if you look through the descriptions what we're looking at. So we see ice cream cases, we see cabinets, counters, we'll see time clocks, we'll see dairy cases, we'll see bakery ovens, we'll see sinks, scanners, things like that. So it's your typical equipment that you would see in a grocery store. Now if we move on to Exhibit 7. Now, this exhibit includes letters that we've received from experts in the industry, different participants in the industry, so they may be involved with the grocery stores, they may be involved with the equipment dealers, but each of these letters gives their opinions on what they think the value of this type of equipment should be. And then we'll also see a couple examples of some equipment that actually sold from Vaughn stores. So starting on page 1, we have a letter from a gentleman that I met at a conference recently. His name is John Herr. He's a property tax manager for Publix grocery stores based out of Orlando. And I'll just go ahead and I'll read this letter to you. It says, Dear Mr. Buskirk, it was a pleasure speaking with you at the IPT symposium last month. I wanted to make sure I was giving you accurate information, so I went back to our sales data of store equipment. The biggest difference between using an economic life table and calculating value is the point in time at which the value changes. The majority of the economic life tables in Florida have a floor of 20%, which is grossly overstated the longer an asset stays in service. Any asset can last longer than its expected average economic life, but has little to no value after a number of years. That's important to note. So just because something lasts and just because something is still in service doesn't necessarily mean that it retains the value that it's being assessed at. Then it says the depreciation tables with the floor do not take that into consideration in the actual value of the assets. Then he has 2 bullet points. Number 1, in 2016 and 17, Publix had a total of 20 new stores in the 45,000 square foot range with an average of $3,350,000 installed cost per store. Then number 2, by far, refrigeration is the most expensive asset in the store. Display cases are the asset that has the most resale data available. In the first 6 months of 2017, 378 display cases were sold with an average recovery percentage of 0.5% of the original cost. Based on the sales information, the asset reaches a 20% value at just under 7 years with higher depreciation in the first 4 years. I would propose a fair depreciation schedule for refrigeration equipment as follows. And then he gives his opinion for what he thinks that the trend factor should be. So I believe in the first year, the county says that this equipment is 89% good, meaning 89% of its original acquisition costs is still good, and that's what they claim the value is. Using our 8-year factors, I believe, well, I can just go ahead and go back. Okay, I take that back. What the county's using for the first year is 93% good. And what we're using is 88% good. What Mr. Herr suggests is using 70% good. So his opinion coincides with the article that we saw on the dogmatic use of the Iowa curves, saying that it may or may not incorporate all types of obsolescence. He's looking at what his equipment actually sells for. So there is economic obsolescence built into that. There's physical obsolescence built into that. These factors that are being used, they don't take into account all forms of depreciation. So the factors that Mr. Herr is suggesting that we use, they vary about 10 to 20% from what we're using in our valuation and what the county's using in theirs. And then on page 2, he goes on to say, shelving for a new store is purchased as a package with each individual part detailed on the purchasing documents. This allows for replacement of it in sections or individual pieces as required by wear and tear, etc. I located 3 full store sales of shelving. Sale 1 had an average age of shelving of 7 years and recovered 8.42% of original cost. Sale 2 had an average age of shelving of 10 years and recovered 6.67% of original cost. Sale 3 had an average age of shelving of 12.5 years and recovered 6.77% original cost. Based on the sales information, the asset reaches a 20% value at just under 6 years, with higher depreciation in the first 4 years, but with a slightly higher resale value as a percentage of cost than refrigeration, mostly because metal is easier to recycle, or because the metal is easier to recycle. I would propose a fair depreciation schedule of shelving as follows. It's not quite as aggressive as the refrigeration that he suggests, but it's still more aggressive than what's being used by the county. And it's also important to note that he says that the shelving has a higher resale value just because it's easier to recycle this type of metal, meaning that it really has no use, no practical use in a store after this store is done using it. Then in the last paragraph, he says all stores are evaluated and receive a review and updating where assets are replaced, usually based on competitive advantage and new technology that would increase efficiency at the 5-year mark from opening date. The first remodel that generates significant asset replacement occurs at the 10-year mark from opening date. Then the same evaluation as was done at the 10-year mark is done every 5 years thereafter with asset replacement as needed. Closed store assets that are not in new condition are sold at auction individually and are not sold as a complete store. Hopefully this information will be helpful and provide a fair valuation basis for both the taxpayer and the county. On page 3, we have a letter from Vaughn's. And this letter is from their purchasing manager at the time. Her name was Diana Meechan. If we go to the second paragraph of the letter, it says a typical Vaughn's store goes through an annual minor remodel, which costs from $20,000 to $75,000. Most of this cost is for remerchandising and replacement of broken or damaged equipment. Unless the repair is minor, it costs less to replace the equipment than to repair them. Our average expense per piece of equipment is less than $2,000. We completely renovate our stores every 6 to 8 years on average, with a budget between $2 to $4 million. Approximately $800,000 to $1.5 million is for the purchase of equipment we plan to replace. Much of this equipment has limited or scrap market value. Some of the reasons we remodel are to keep up with convenience-savvy consumer demands, energy and competition considerations, location and appearance of the store, foot traffic, etc. In most cases, Vaughn's has experienced an increase in store sales after a major remodel of that particular store. Now, at the time that she wrote this letter, the guideline for grocery store equipment was actually 15 years, which is a little bit higher than the 12-year that's being used now. So she references that in the following paragraph. It says, it is my understanding that the assessor's office is currently using a 15-year table, which places the value of our equipment at 55% after 10 years of continuous usage in a commercial environment. This is too high. We are fortunate if we can recover 10% of our original cost after 10 years. Once the equipment is 8 to 10 years old, the cost to dispose the equipment is more than its value. The used equipment dealer pays us anywhere between 0 to 2% of the original cost to haul our used equipment away. If the used equipment dealers do not take our equipment, we scrap them at the site and Williams Services takes them to the dump. Then the last paragraph says, based on my experience in purchasing new equipment and disposing of old equipment and fixtures at Vaughn's, our equipment could fetch about 50% and 10% after 5 and 10 years of usage, respectively, if the equipment is sold in working condition and as a complete store. That's important to note. She says that it retains the most value when it's sold as a complete store, which is not the standard that we use when determining fair market value. If it's sold as a complete store, That's considered the going concern value or the value in use, which is typically higher than fair market value. She goes on to say, if equipment is removed from the store, it is only worth scrap value because the cost associated with removal, refurbishing, and marketing is more than the value of the used equipment in as-is condition. From the various tables used by the assessor's office to value our equipment, the 8-year valuation table reflects a more realistic value of our equipment. And then all the way through, let's see, page 15, it's just more letters. They all say the exact same thing. People from different companies, people from competitors of Vons and Publix, people that deal with used equipment, people that deal with refrigeration equipment, they all say basically the same thing. So again, just in the spirit of efficiency, I think we can go ahead and just have the board take those back as reference. Starting on page 16, we have some examples of equipment that's sold from Vaughn stores that were closed down. So on page 16 is an example from a store in Orange County that sold in 2001. You'll see there at the top of the page, handwritten, says that the county's assessed value is $1.4 million. And down below that, you'll see how those numbers are factored in. On page 17, you'll see an equipment removal order showing exactly what was paid for this equipment. So the county had a value of $1.4 million, and what was paid for the equipment was just over $14,000. Now, that's a pretty big difference there. But you also have to remember that this is just for the equipment that was considered sellable. Okay, there's, you know, like the letter that we saw from Ms. Meechin said, a lot of this equipment, it's not usable anymore, so it's just hauled away to the dump or recycled. So of the equipment that's actually able to be used after Vons is done with it, it's sold for about $14,000. And in the following pages, you'll see an itemized list of what was sold. So this list starts on page 19. If you look at the descriptions, it's basically the same stuff that you'll see in the fixed asset detail that we provided. And this list goes from page 19 through 32. On page 32, down there at the bottom of those figures, you'll see a line that says item count of 654. So 654 items were sold for a total of $14,000. Now, the next example that we have is a store from Santa Barbara County. It's on page 33. This one sold in 2001. Now, we don't have the assessed value, but if you look on page 37, you'll see that there is a bid for all this equipment at $10,000. On page 41, you'll see the equipment removal order that shows $10,000. On page 42, you'll see a cashier's check paid to the order of Vons for $10,000. On page 43, you'll see again an itemized list. All these sets of documents, they follow pretty much the same arrangement. So you'll see the equipment removal order, what was paid for it. You'll see a cashier's check or whatever method they paid with, and then you'll see the itemized list of what was sold. So then the next example, I believe it's the last one. Yeah, it's a store from LA County. The store closed in 2001. And again, handwritten there at the top of the page, you'll see an assessed value of $1.2 million. These values that you're seeing, the $1 million, $1.2 million, that's pretty typical for a Vaughn store in this area. But then on the following page, page 53, you'll see again the equipment removal order, and the amount paid was $5,600 for what the county says is over $1 million worth of equipment. On the following pages, you'll see the payment methods. On page 57 is the itemized list. That list ends on page 67, where it shows that there were over 500 items that were part of this sale. 500 items that were sold for just over $5,000. And then on the very back of this exhibit, page 68, you'll see a letter from the State Board of Equalization. It's a letter to assessors, and it talks about the internal guidelines that are used to determine which sets of trend factors to use for each category of equipment. And I'll just go ahead and read from the highlighted sections. It says the primary purpose of any distribution of Assessment Standards Division internal guidelines to county assessors was to notify assessors of the guidelines ASD staff follows when sampling county local assessment rolls. In some cases, such as the Schedule for Economic Lives of Machinery and Equipment, formerly known as Policy and Procedures Number 10, it was provided to county assessors as a guide of economic lives to use if an assessor had insufficient information or staffing to develop local estimates of appropriate economic lives. The economic lives provided in what was previously known as Policy and Procedures Number 10 and any subsequent revisions were based on the knowledge and experience of ASD's auditor appraisers, opinions of assessors and their staffs, and information from various industry resources. In most cases, they were not based on actual studies of the average service lives of any of the listed groups of equipment. I think that's pretty important to note. It later says county assessors are not required to follow the internal guidelines issued for ASD staff. Internal guidelines do not have the authority of a property tax rule, letter to assessor, or assessor's handbook because they are not reviewed and approved by the elected Board of Equalization members. They were developed for use by ASD staff throughout the state for typical situations and may not represent the best available local information for a specific appraisal question. ASD's internal guidelines are not to be cited as an authority in assessment appeals hearings. An assessment appeals case should be decided by applying the appropriate property tax statutes, regulations, court rulings, and sound appraisal practice to the pertinent information available for the situation in dispute. So just to summarize, the guidelines that are implemented by the county assessors are not based on any actual studies. It's based on opinions, and it's to be used as a guideline and not to be used as an authority in a hearing like we're in today. Okay, so this 12-year, the 12-year trend factors that the county is using, it's a guideline, and the county did their job correctly by applying the guideline, but we don't believe that guideline is correct. Now, the following three exhibits are more examples of the sales of this type of equipment. So what we've already looked at is the opinions of these industry experts saying that the equipment is turned over on average between 5 and 10 years, some say 8 years. We see that Vaughn's themselves turn over this equipment at that same rate, but we haven't really looked at what this equipment is worth. How much can we sell it for if it's offered for sale in the open market, in compliance with Code Section 110, willing buyer, willing seller. So typically, this equipment is sold at auction. You're not going to see any storefronts where they sell used grocery store equipment, like going to a used car dealer. You go to any car dealership, they're going to have a new section and a used section. You don't see that with this type of equipment. So typically, the market for this type of equipment is an auction. So that's why we have examples from 3 auction sales that we collected over the years. We have many more examples after this, or besides this, but I figured we would just present 3 of them for you today. So Exhibit 8 is our first example. We have an auction from Garden Grove, which is in Orange County, and this auction took place in 2005. And each of these 3 sets of documents, they follow the same format. It'll show a flyer for the auction. It'll show that it was actually advertised. They tried to get the word out there. They wanted to increase the amount of the sale by as much as possible. You'll see the pictures of the equipment before it was removed. You'll see, in some cases, the pictures after it was removed. And then you'll see the closing statement or the settlement agreement for what was actually paid for all this equipment. And then we'll also show you what the county had it enrolled at, so you can compare the county's roll value with what it sold for. So starting on page 2, you'll see the auction flyer, and then the subsequent pages, it shows the advertising that went into it. On page 3, you'll see the different methods that they used to advertise this. It went into basically local newspapers, and they spent about $5,000 just trying to advertise this to get the word out. Starting on page 23, you can see pictures from inside the store, just to get a general idea of what was being sold that day. So you'll see things like the refrigerator cases, you'll see shelving, see bakery equipment, things like that. Just like I said before, just typical grocery store equipment. And these pictures continue until page 49. And then starting on page 50, you'll see the itemized list of what was actually sold. You'll see what it was sold, or you'll see what was sold, the quantity that was sold of each, and how much each item sold for. And this list continues through page 65. Starting on page 66 are pictures of the store after the equipment was removed. And these pictures go through page 84. Okay, and then on 85, you'll see the settlement statement from the auction company to Vaughn's. It's addressed to Ms. Diana Meachin, who we mentioned in the letter earlier. But right there in the middle of the page, you'll see a line item that says gross sheet total day of sale. And then below that, gross proceeds after adjustment. It's only a $50 adjustment, but the gross proceeds that were received from the sale of the store is just about $69,000. Okay, now after the costs that Vaughn's has to pay for this auction, the net proceeds that Vaughn's received is less than $30,000. Now go ahead and just keep your finger on that page, 85, and then go back to page 110. On page 110, this is the assessor's valuation worksheet showing how they trended each of the costs that were reported by Vaughn's for this year. So you can see down there highlighted on the bottom of page 110, the county has an assessed roll value of $1.2 million. If we go back to page 85, you'll see Vaughn's only received $29,000. It's a pretty big difference. Even if we used the more aggressive depreciation table, an 8-year table, we're not going to get anywhere close to that $29,000 figure. Okay, it might take the 1.2 million. It might cut it in half. It might reduce it by about 30 or 40%, but it's not going to get anywhere close to what the equipment actually sold for. Now if we go to Exhibit 9. We have another example of an auction sale. This time it was in 2007 in Lake Forest, also in Orange County. And from page 2 on, you'll see the advertising for this sale. The different forms of media they used, again, typically newspapers. And starting on page 18, again, you'll see pictures from before the auction, the equipment while it's still in place. It's pretty much the same as before. You see refrigerators, ice cream cases, see bakery equipment, shelving, deli equipment. And these pictures go on through page 30. Or then on page 31, you'll see an itemized list of what was sold, a description, quantity, and the amount paid. And this list goes from page 31 through page 43. This list includes things like aluminum racks, you'll see carts, you'll see refrigerators, coffee makers, same type of equipment as before. On page 44, you'll see the settlement statement from this sale. Right there in the middle of the page under gross proceeds, $74,000. Net proceeds after charges and commissions was $30,000. Okay, now again, if you can just go ahead and keep your finger on that page and go back to page 65. So we can compare the roll value to the sale price. So this is similar to the valuation worksheet we looked at before for the Garden Grove location. And you'll see the two numbers highlighted. That's the allocation between fixtures and personal property. And then down below that in red, you'll see $900,000 is the assessed value. Going back to the settlement statement, you'll see that it sold for $30,000. So compare $30,000 to $900,000. And again, if we applied the more aggressive depreciation table, the 8-year table, to this assessment, it still wouldn't reach anywhere close to the $30,000 that it sold for. And then our final exhibit, Exhibit 10, is a third example of this type of sale. This time it's from San Diego, 2007. On page 2, you'll see the advertising flyer that went out. Now, these flyers that they send out, it doesn't just go to a few people. You'll see on page 3 the postage expense for this flyer. It says mailing services, 1,882 pieces. So they sent out this flyer to nearly 2,000 people, businesses, and so on. And that's pretty typical. You would see that in the other two sales too. So anywhere between, I don't know, 1,500 to 2,500 people see this flyer. So they're making it known that this equipment is available for sale. It's not only available to a select few. On page 12, you'll see the pictures from before the sale. Again, same type of equipment. And beginning on page 30 is the itemized list of the equipment sold. And that list goes from page 30 to 37, or I'm sorry, 38. And on page 39, we'll see the settlement statement from this sale. Gross proceeds of $55,000, net proceeds of $17,000. And then if we look at page 61, highlighted there at the top of the page, you'll see $595,000. That's the roll value for San Diego County for this year. So the county had enrolled $595,000, and Vaughn's actually received $17,000. So another thing that's important to note on this sale is if we look at page 60, there at the top of the page, you'll see the costs that were valued for the store equipment category. Okay. Right above store equipment, you'll see a couple numbers up there. You'll see triple zeros, and you'll see 100, and then you'll see A10. What that A10 means is that this equipment was valued on a commercial 10-year table. So it's already below the 12-year guideline that the Board of Equalization has recommended. So they're already allowing a more aggressive depreciation schedule for this type of equipment, and it still wasn't even close to what the equipment actually sold for. So with that, we rest our case in chief. If the board has any questions, I can go ahead and try to answer them.
I have a question. It's okay with the chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you ever have any of this appraised by independent appraiser?
No.
Mr. Austin, do you have any questions for him?
Oh, I have a few questions, okay. First off,
I'm sorry, would this be considered cross?
this is
Okay.
my cross-examination.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, let me just, is that the conclusion of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
This is our conclusion.
My question for the Assessor's Office of Madera County. First, I'd like to ask, are you aware of R&T Code Section 402.5?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm sure I can look it up.
Okay. Board, R&T Code Section 402.5 is comparable sales analysis regulation. What it basically says is, if you are going to value equipment by sales, which is what these exhibits are, they have to be near in time to the valuation date. Now, as you can recall, most, if not all of these exhibits are dealing with sales 2004, 2005, 2002, 2006, 2007. Now, guess what? That's 10 years old, okay? If we abide by 402.5, we should be no more than a year below the valuation date, which is 1/1/2017, and no more than 90 days past that date. All of this information is irrelevant. We can't use it, the board can't use it, and BOE can't use it, doesn't use it. Okay, so that's the question, okay? Since it's so old, we can't use it. So how can you believe that you can use it?
Okay, a couple of things. To the best of my knowledge, the time restriction only deals with 90 days after the valuation date. It says a reasonable time before, but it doesn't really give an exact time frame for how far before the sale is allowed. But more importantly, we're only presenting these sales as an indicator of the value. I didn't look at that San Diego store, say Vaughn's received $18,000 for it, and say, hey, the stores in Madera County are worth $18,000 too. We're only using it as an indicator to show that when this equipment actually does sell, it's nowhere near the real value. So I'm not using it as an actual comparable sale, it's only an indicator.
Okay. Then, board, I'd like you to throw out all the exhibits that refer to anything that's older than a year from the evaluation date, which is basically 2016. I would think almost all of this documentation is irrelevant. We can't use it. And so the
We
taxpayer
disagree
can't
with that.
use it.
I mean, like I said, we're not saying that a store is worth the amounts that these stores sold for. It's only an indicator to show what the true market value is when these stores actually sell.
But there's no stores in here that's even in 2016. How can that be relevant?
We believe it's relevant. If you look at the letters from the industry experts, you can see that across this timeline, we have letters going back to 2003, and then the most recent one from Publix in 2018, I just got it about a week ago. It shows that the same trend has continued over that period from 03 through 18, 15 years. It's the same trend.
That that
Nothing has
one that
changed.
you talked about, okay, what specific date was that sent to you
The letter, I believe, was dated December 3rd.
of 2018?
Yes.
I can't use that either. I gotta be within 90 days of my evaluation
But
date. I can't use that information.
It's not a comparable sale.
I never said it was. I'm saying that I can't
The
use it.
90 days refers to comparable sales,
I can't use it.
but it's not a comparable sale. That's my argument.
Okay.
It's not a comparable sale, and the 90 days refers to comparable sales.
Okay. There's no use arguing a point. Board, I would ask that all the information relevant to anything prior to 2016 be thrown out as irrelevant and not in compliance with our regulations. Question, secondary question. Does the California State Board of Equalization publish a guideline that tells 58 county assessors what live table to use in regards to the equipment, store equipment, and grocery store equipment?
There is a guideline. There's the state board's guideline, and there's also the CAA guideline. They both say 12 years.
Okay. Now, has Vons and/or Safeway challenged that live table with the Board of Equalization?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. So, to the best of your knowledge, is there 58 counties assessing this equipment 12-year life?
Not all of them, no.
Most of them are.
Most of them.
Yes. Okay, in regards to his case in chief, as far as the assessor's office is concerned, we stand on the guidelines that's published by the State Board of Equalization using a 12-year life on this equipment, and that's what's assessed. And the California Assessors Association, which are elected assessors up and down the state of California, also use 12
If I may,
I would just, let me just interject.
Okay.
You haven't given your presentation yet. I assume that's all going to come out in your presentation, so it's, we don't need to.
I'm just asking questions to make sure that.
Yeah, yeah.
I know where he's coming from.
What the purpose of this is, if you have any specific questions regarding what he presented.
Right, and that's what that's what I was.
Are you done with the questions then?
Yeah, I don't have any more questions.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
you're ready to move on to the
Yeah.
presentation?
Yeah.
And you will have the opportunity to question him when he's done with it.
that's fine. Can I just respond to the last
Okay.
statement that he made? If we would just refer back to applicant's exhibit 7 on the last page is the LTA from the State Board of Equalization that says that simply presenting the guidelines is not appropriate to use as evidence in this type of hearing.
Okay. So it's getting close to lunchtime, and one of our members has some work issues here, so I was going to adjourn until 1 o'clock. Is that okay?
That's fine with us.
Okay. And how long is your presentation expected to take?
15, 20 minutes
Oh, okay,
at most, you think?
I
Okay.
think it's probably half an hour to be more accurate.
Okay.
a half an hour,
Half an
okay.
hour.
And is this the last hearing of today?
It's
I
the
don't see
last
anybody
hearing.
else here, that's why
It's
I'm
the
saying
Yeah,
that.
it's the last hearing. Everything else is withdrawals or.
Stipulation,
Yeah.
continuation, et cetera, but hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will reconvene at 1 o'clock and he will do his presentation.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. the producer.
Okay, it's now 1 o'clock and we're back in session. We finished up, as I recall, with the taxpayers' presentation and the cross-questioning, we'll call cross-questioning, not cross-examination, but by Mr. Austin. And so now it's time for Mr. Austin to put on the county's presentation.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to supervising auditor appraiser and another auditor appraiser, and they're gonna talk about bonds. Yeah, and they're both the same, so, you know.
Yeah, we were doing both of them at the same time because they're more similar than dissimilar. Yeah.
Exactly right, yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon, the board members. Yes, the two appeals are together as presented by the applicants, but my presentation specifically to the Vons Company, and I guess the other half is going to be presented by Mr. Austin, the Safeway one. So my presentation is for appeal number 17R016. My name is Tran Cooper, COOPER. I work in the Assessor Office of Madera County as the Supervising Auditor Appraiser. I obtained my appraiser certificate in March of 1999. I earned my advanced appraiser certificate in November of 2002. Vons Companies, Inc. is one of the largest food and drug retailers in North America. The subject property is Vons Supermarket located at 40044 Highway 49, Oakhurst, California, also known as store number 2409 by the company. The store occupies 58,175 square feet of space. It has been at this location since November 1994. The store consists of different departments such as bakery and deli, fresh produce, pharmacy, and etc. The typical supermarket equipment consists of freezer, walk-in and reach-in coolers, produce cases, oven, shelving, checkout lanes equipped with cash register and scanner, and etc. Advances in technology do not apply to this type of business. Therefore, unlike high-tech medical equipment, the equipment does not need to be upgraded or replaced periodically. Once the freezers, coolers, shelving, oven, and etc. are installed, do not require frequent replacements. The exception to this would consist of cash register and scanner and miscellaneous display and refreshing. I would like to point out at this time that the cash register and scanner are not being assessed with a 12-year life. Rather, they are being assessed under point of sale equipment table, which equivalent to an 8-year life. Once our office utilized the cost approach to value for this assessment, the commercial factor table 12-year economic life was used as recommended by the California Assessors Association, and as in my exhibit H, page 1. I can go over that with you after my presentations, or however you would like to see it.
Any comments? You need to speak into the microphone.
It would be under exhibit H and page 1, and the little package, not the big one that Sarah just passed out.
Exhibit A.
Just a smaller one.
And if you add the page 1, there's California Assessor Association, I have highlighted grocery store, supermarket, life of 12 years is recommended.
I don't have any question on
Okay,
it.
so I can go on? All right, thank you.
I have one question. How is this derived?
There's a subcommittee within the Assessor Association. They will do market study, and based on audit information, they do comprise information from those, and they have come up with this table into the recommended table since 2002.
Do we recognize the Iowa 1930?
That's based on that, yes,
It's based on that?
yes.
This is so old. Wasn't there any other study done afterwards, after that? We still follow that old?
Not that it have been implemented to my knowledge. I don't know if there's other study done, but no other curve have been used since.
So this is well known in the industry. That's what everybody uses, Iowa 1930?
I don't know if everybody does, but the assessors associations and the state of California does use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I can go on with my presentation. So, the assessor's office applied the recommended depreciations to the applicant's reported cost. I have conducted an audit in 2014 of Vons, and based on my information at that time, during my physical inspection, the representative from the company said that there has not been any remodel/removal of any store equipment in the last 4 years, which was involved in my audit period, or for the last 22 years, except for 2003, where the coughing cases was replaced with frozen cases. And that was the quote-unquote major changes that took place. Other than that, everything has been there since 1994, and it remains the same with some minor fixings and maintenance. The comparable sale and income approach to value were not considered for this property. In my opinion, the applicant has not met the burden of proof that a short-term life should be used. In closing, the store has been in business at this location since November 1994. Minimal replacement was reported by the applicant and evidenced through audits. The assessor's office respectfully requests that the board accepts and upholds the total assessed value of $1,270,620 as enrolled. And at this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Melissa Clark. She will highlight some of the points that were presented by the applicant's representative.
Melissa Clark. I am an auditor appraiser 3 for the Madera County Assessor. And I wanted to bring to the board's attention the initial presentation, the initial exhibit, where it talked a lot about the necessity for upgrading equipment and for constant remodeling in grocery stores these days. I want to point out that this particular Vons store in Oakhurst is not at the same level of sophistication and advancement as stores in LA and New York City that were referenced in the appellant's exhibit. And to the point where the store in Oakhurst does not even offer any online ordering whatsoever. So in effect, it's almost as if the stores in this county are maybe about 20 years behind others. That we have people that want to come to grocery stores and shop at the grocery stores. The demand for remodeling is not high. And as Ms. Cooper pointed out in her presentation, no remodeling was reported during the audit period that when she did her last audit in 2014. So if they are remodeling periodically, they're not reporting the costs. Also, I know that there was a lot of talk about the Iowa curve and the fact that it was developed in the 1930s. And on the last page of the appellant's Exhibit 3, he has highlighted the 54.74 figure as remaining percent good. So that would be the amount of assets that are still in service after a given amount of time, 54%. And then the next exhibit, Exhibit 4, has several figures where the numbers approximating 50%, 54% are highlighted, but the two exhibits compare apples to oranges, because in Exhibit 4, the cumulative cost figure around 50% and 57%, and the ones that are highlighted do not have to do with the percentage of assets that are still in service after a given time. Rather, they have to do with the cumulative cost of all the assets reported for each year. So that means if the assessee has $500,000 in equipment, it's just showing that everything, for example, on page 1, everything for the year 2006 and newer comprises 50.98% of the total cost of assets that are being reported. It does not correlate to the Iowa curve in any way. It's two separate issues. As Ms. Cooper pointed out, we don't include payment equipment and credit card equipment on the 12-year commercial table. It has a separate table. It's assessed separately. And the CAA recommendations are based upon market data, current market data. So while the statistical analysis they are using does incorporate the Iowa curve, the data is more recent. It's not old data, and depreciation is studied, and the Assessors Association does extensive lifing studies every year, and they rotate through all of the categories of industrial equipment that we deal with and commercial equipment. And so they do keep it fresh. And one more thing is that the store manager did point out that they had been using the same equipment for 22 years. So I would say that that's a lot longer than the 12-year table that this equipment is being assessed upon. And that's all I have to say. Is there any questions?
I think we'll wait till the end, because you said Mr. Roskin's going to talk about the other store, right? Let's get them both in, and then we'll do all the questions.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about the Safeway store. There is some improvements. Oh, Exhibit B as in boy. That was A, and this is B. It's the big one. It's got 250 some odd pages. Okay,
That's Exhibit B?
Exhibit B, right.
Yeah, we've got B on it.
You got what?
B,
B as in boy.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, this is 1606 Exchange. Sent it off to Safeway and the tax agent for Property Tax Assistance Company in November 2018. We have a value on the property, improvements, and this is page 1 of the 1606 Exchange, Exhibit B. We got improvements of $636,939, fixtures of $468,770, personal property $138,850 for a total value of $1,244,559. This Safeway started in 1992 on Cleveland here in Madera, and it's basically still there. I think it's a pack and save, if I remember right. Yeah, it's pack and save, yeah. And And basically, I want to turn to page 223 of the exhibits. As you can tell, that's a 2017 business property statement. And it says Safeway on the top, Pack and Save. And if we turn to page 225, here's their rendition. And they reported $2.2 million worth of assets, of equipment, and $33,000 worth of buildings. And 226, page 226. If you look at that, that particular cost detail that they're required to report to us, as you can tell, on the very left-hand side of the column, machinery equipment, basically their store equipment, totals $1,961,000. And as you can tell, the number right above it is almost $800,000 of equipment prior to 1995. Okay, so the assumption would be it's probably the 1992 equipment that started out. And as you can tell, as you look up, it looks like there was some equipment purchased in 2000, some equipment purchased in 2002. But as you can tell, the biggest number is 2007, which is 10 years ago. And most of all of this equipment is older than 10 years, and we only have it assessed as a 12-year life. And as you can tell, we allocate office equipment, which has a different life on it, and other equipment, and then personal computers has a different life. And the value calculations. Value calculations look at page 243. As you can tell, we got a schedule of $2.5 million worth of assets, and the assessed values, as I have stated, and we audited this in 2014 also, and all of the equipment is still there as reported. And if you look at page 244, here is our values by the calculations, by the factors. And as you can tell, if you look at 1992, it's 14, and if you look at the left-hand column, it says factors C12, which is 12-year life. Look at all the way down to, matter of fact, you can look at 2002, it's got 14%. That's the percent good. And it goes all the way down to 1992, well, 1990 at 14%. And the value for the 1992 equipment is $104,000 based upon $744,000 worth of assets. So we are recognizing these assets as being fairly old. And if you look at page 245, this is what?
Can you hold on just a second?
Uh-huh.
So our copies, the page numbers are kind of cut off, so they're trying to find the page numbers. that
Oh,
you're
I'm sorry.
referencing.
I got the original. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
If you can give us just a second.
Okay, all right.
The third digit is cut off most of the pages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is it
So
really?
we got the 24, but we don't have the next.
Oh, you don't have five?
So there's only 10 possibilities of which one's
That's right,
five.
exactly, yeah. Uh-huh. Well, let's say it this
Looks
way.
like this.
Yeah, it looks like this, and it's.
Yeah, well, we got that. We're
Okay,
that. We're
cool.
just
All
trying
right.
to find the right one.
All right. Just keep going. Let's see, it starts at what, 243? The next one's 244. Next is 245.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys see them now? Oh, really? Wow. Modern computers. Okay, would you like me to go over it again, or?
I don't know. I think I get your point.
Hey, we got time. As long as we leave by 5, we'll be fine.
Would you
Is
guys
there
like
any
to
way-
go over it again,
Is there
or?
any way we could put something up on the screen so people could see what the page looks
Yeah,
like?
we
Is
could
there a
do
way to
that.
Or is that too complicated?
You can't?
We may have to call NASA in to take care of it for us.
Oh, you're right, huh? Yeah. You sure can. Here you go. Oh.
All right, we'll take a short moment here, let her.
Technical difficulties, as they say on the TV screen.
Yes.
Mike, maybe, assuming she's going to get it done, maybe get together the pages you're talking about.
What's that?
No, I can present them up on the screen, so it'll show up on each of your monitors. You just gotta.
Oh, sweet.
I gotta put my glasses on.
Look for 243.
Yeah, that one, on my page copy, that number shows up. It's the only one.
Really? Sorry about that.
I was struggling to follow along. I thought I was the only one. I see everybody flipping through the pages like, yeah.
Yep, I've got 243 listed.
Yeah, I'm kind of following along here.
Yeah, but to get to 243, it's got to chop off the other part. We're missing part of the other, the left-hand side of the 240.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
okay,
got a
all
little
right.
chop over there.
You chopped pretty good, huh?
No good deed goes unturned.
I had this done at lunchtime, so you know.
There's one more. Wait, I can do this. Hold on. No, possibly bring a flash drive.
Okay. I don't know, I'm ready to just go ahead, I'm ready
my
to
main
go ahead.
information.
Can you find, do you have yours? No?
I got it.
You got it? Okay, he's got it, I got it.
Specific pages you want them to look at?
Yeah. Two,
Up to them and show what they look like.
okay, all right.
Okay,
Okay, here.
what page number are you talking about?
Okay, here's 243.
Okay, I got 243.
Okay, cool.
Yep,
Okay. See, that?
I got it.
Okay,
yep.
okay, now 244 right behind it.
Yeah, right behind it.
Okay, and then 245 right behind that.
Yeah, got that.
246 right behind that. 247 right behind that. 28, 29, 50.
Okay, which one you want to look at though?
Okay.
Or all of them?
I was gonna touch on each one of them,
Oh, okay.
but we don't necessarily have to. I mean, you can if you want. Okay.
It's your presentation, so.
Let me go back to 243, okay? As you can tell, in the middle of this, it's got total, it says control total, $2,588,017, okay? And it's allocated between supplies, machinery, equipment, other equipment, tools, dies and molds, computers, telephone, forklift, sign, appraised value, and that's a total, okay? Now, each one of these asset schedules class is is on the next pages, and you can see, let's go to 244, the next page. And if you look at the left-hand side, it says factors C12, and then it itemizes each factor. 2016 is 93%. If you look at all the way down to the bottom, it's 1990 at 14%. Okay, and these calculations are basically across that page. And as we talked about, 1992, there's $744,684 worth of assets. The value is $104,255 in 1992. In other words, they have still, roughly 25% of their assets still on site after, how many years? 16 years? No, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 25 years, sorry. Okay, and that's, and all we're trying to do is establish that because, we still have it assessed at a 12-year life, and as you can tell, a lot of the equipment is older than 12 years. And so we think meaning the counties, are being reasonable because they have most of their equipment that's older than 12 years, and we're still assessing it as a 12-year life. And the BOE recommends 12 years. The California Assessors Association recommends 12 years. And if industry believes the life table is incorrect, for whatever reason, there's a method for the taxpayers, the industry, to challenge the life table that BOE has developed, along with the Assessors Association. And they will do studies. They've done studies at least every year that I know, that I've been working on this, and it's different things. They study a whole myriad of stuff. And
Who's they?
BOE, State Board of Equalization.
State Board of Equalization.
State Board of Equalization, yeah. And they've been doing that for years, and we, in the Assessor's Office, rely on that because these factors are utilized up and down the state of California in 58 other counties, and we do not deviate from the recommended life that BOE, Board of Equalization, and Assessors Association has come up with. And that's why we have a 12-year life. And that's my presentation. If you want to get into specifics, I can get into specifics, but it's not necessary.
Do you have some questions for the county?
Plenty. I would defer to the board first if they have any questions first.
No, we don't have any at this time.
Okay. Ms. Cooper, in your part of the presentation, you mentioned that there is no technological advances in this type of industry. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Are you aware?
As far as the store equipment, not
Okay.
scanners and checkers.
Okay. Well, you mean as far as, say, like refrigeration?
Not, yes, not to my knowledge. Not according to my audit through the paperwork that's provided or not provided in this case to me, yes.
Okay. Well, are you aware of the always changing government regulations as far as efficiency and energy saving equipment goes?
Some of it, yes. But not specifically in the grocery industry, no.
Okay, but as far as commercial refrigeration goes, are you aware of the regulations that are constantly changing? And how businesses are required to adhere to those new standards?
I have not been told, no.
Okay. Did you see the exhibits that I presented earlier regarding this information?
Yes, I looked at it as you were along.
Had you seen that before?
From what you've sent to me during our conversations, yes.
Okay. So then you agree that there are technological advances?
In their opinion, to what you presented.
Okay.
But the store did not replace those with the new technology, as you mentioned.
Okay. Now, I guess this question is for anybody from the assessor's office, but The CAA guidelines were presented as part of your evidence for using a 12-year table. Had you seen that letter from the Board of Equalization prior to today saying that that is not sufficient evidence in an appeals hearing?
Which exhibit are you referring to?
That's correct. There's a letter to assessors, I believe it was 1994 or 1996 that was sent out, saying that simply providing the guidelines is not sufficient evidence and it doesn't provide any authority in an assessment appeals hearing. Have you seen that before?
Well, let me say it this way to you, to answer your question. This was done in 1996, okay? Since that point in time, there has been a lot of different studies made, and one of the reasons why the studies were being made is because of these letters, because they're guidelines. Well, if you have guidelines that everyone uses, then the guidelines are true. If the guidelines are not being used, deviate from said guidelines, then basically, then at that point in time, then you should be asking for or reviewing that guidelines with the state of California. We, meaning the assessor's office, we don't have the necessary manpower and the staffing to do those kind of things. That's why we are relying on the Board of Equalization. And the Board of Equalization doesn't change it, then we don't change it.
I'm not sure that answered my question, but I'm asking, were you aware that just simply providing the guidelines is not considered sufficient evidence?
If we have better evidence to support what you're requesting during audits and appeals in this case, then we would have to consider that. That's what the board is saying, that these are the guidelines. But if you have better information provided to you that's supporting a different year life, that's what you should go with. But in this case, I have not received anything through the audit that would have changed my mind in the life of being used.
Let me ask it this way then. So you provided the 12-year guidelines as suggested by the CAA, correct? And you said that they do a market study and they review these guidelines on an annual basis, correct?
That's to my understanding.
I believe that was your testimony, and I'm not.
Actually,
I'm
the
not arguing
Assessors
against that.
Association actually reviews these, and basically, they talk with industry. I mean, I'm talking about the Assessors Association. They talk with industry, and then they also talk to all the business chiefs up and down the state of California, and the people that actually do those. And if there's a lot of deviations, then they will put it upon themselves to look at a life table. There apparently is not enough deviations to actually review the life tables, otherwise they've already done it.
Okay, let me finish my question. Do you have the studies that went into the development of that 12-year guideline? You say they're done annually, so
No, we
do you have
not
one?
have that.
No, why don't you have it?
Huh?
Why don't you have it?
It's
Why?
recommended by the state board organization.
But why don't you have the supporting analysis that went into that guideline?
You know how much that information would be? I mean, it would fill this room. We don't keep that information. That's why we rely on board equalization.
So you don't have it.
We do not have that.
You don't know what went into it.
We know what went into it, but I don't have the information. I've been doing this for 36 years. I know exactly what goes into it.
I would argue that that's
I've seen
not.
the data.
I would argue that that's not sufficient evidence for support of a 12-year table. Just saying, hey, they review it every year.
Yeah.
We need to see the
Let-
support.
Let me just, I think we've had the question asked and answered.
I-
You're not going to agree on the
No,
answer,
yeah,
then
I-
let's move
I
on to
get-
something
yeah.
else.
I get that. Okay. Another thing that the assessor's office pointed out was that they looked at the two stores that we have under appeal and determined that that has created a market. Would you agree to that?
Excuse me, I didn't understand the question.
So you looked at the two different stores that we're appealing today that are
Yes.
in the county, and you believe that the information regarding those two stores alone is enough to create a market for this type of equipment.
I still don't understand what you're trying to get to.
Okay.
Or what's your question?
Okay, so let me use a different example then.
Okay.
Say we're valuing a house, okay, and I'm trying to find fair market value for this house. would I look at the sale of just one other house to see what I should pay for this house I'm looking at? Or should I look at a broad spectrum of homes to figure out what market value is?
You need to look at a broad spectrum, but the information that you have supplied today is dated like 10 years ago.
Okay,
And so it's irrelevant to what you're talking about.
so we presented,
have
we
sales.
presented our cumulative cost analysis over a 10-year period or I'm sorry, 8-year period, from 2010 through 2017, where we looked at different regions. We looked at Northern and Southern California, and we looked at the state as a whole. And looking at the state as a whole, we looked at nearly 400 stores. And we developed our opinion of market value based on 400 stores. Okay, I don't recall what the total dollar amount of equipment was, but it was probably about $1 billion in acquisitions. And what the assessor's office has done is looked at 2 stores and said, this is the market. So would you agree that just looking at 2 stores is too small of a sample size to determine what the market value is?
We looked at the stores in this county. We used the factor tables as recommended by the State Board of Equalization and the California Assessors Association, and we enrolled them.
Did you do your own study on the retirement frequencies or even the acquisition
State
frequencies?
Board of Equalization does those studies. We do not. And they
So you don't have the supporting
industry-wide,
information?
statewide.
You don't have the supporting documents that went into the derivation of these
You
tables?
can call the state of California and they'll give them to you.
I shouldn't
You
have
want
to.
'em?
I shouldn't have to. We're presenting evidence here. If you have support for a 12-year table, you should be presenting it. We have support for an 8-year table. So our argument is just that you don't have the support for a 12-year table. All you have is a guideline from the CAA or from the BOE saying, this is what we think you should use. We're not going to tell you why. We just think you should.
They've told us why. 58 counties of the state of California uses
Okay.
the same table.
I'll leave that question.
Again, I think
Yeah.
we understand the difference between
Yeah.
the 2 viewpoints, and so we can move on.
Are you familiar with the Iowa curves at all? The curves that are used to calculate the trend factors?
I've seen them, yes.
You've seen them? How familiar are you with them?
Huh?
How familiar are you with them?
I am not as familiar as our staff is.
Okay, well, I guess anybody can answer the question here. Would you agree that the Iowa curves acknowledge that there will be equipment that lasts longer than the average service life? Let me refer to our exhibit here. Exhibit 3 on page 30. You can see the graphs of the different R curves. You have R1 through R5. So of all the 5 curves, or even if we just look at the R3 curve, which is what the Board of Equalization uses to calculate the trend factors, wouldn't you agree that they acknowledge that equipment lasts longer than the average service life?
Yes, and some of them last shorter time. True.
Exactly.
Yes. We
Exactly.
understand that.
That's exactly our point, okay? If you look at just the R3 curve alone, you can see that it probably ends somewhere at around 170% of the average service life, okay? If we have an average service life of 8 years, 170% of that is around 15 years or so, okay? But that number never actually touches 0. It approaches 0, but it never really gets there. So it can really extend to maybe double the average service life or even more. Would you agree to that?
What's your question?
My question is, do you or do you not agree that there is equipment that physically can last 2 or 3 times as long as its average service life?
Yes.
And would you also agree that average service life does not necessarily determine value?
If we're using what is recommended by the guidelines, then as far as we're concerned, that is the market. And if you're questioning the counties using R3 curves, the Iowa R3 curves, and you're talking to the wrong people. You need to be talking to the state organization. And apparently, either you don't want to because they've told you no, or you know that you can't convince them that it's right. And I don't know which.
Let me ask a different question then. Are we required to request a study from the BOE?
Yes,
We're required to.
you're required to. If you don't like the tables that are recommended by the guidelines, then yeah, the industry is required. Not you specifically, or Safeway or Vons, but the industry goes to the Board of Equalization and says, hey, look, we think the life should be 8 years. And here's our data.
Where's the statute or rule or anything that you can find that says that we are required to petition the BOE for a change in the life table? Where does it say anywhere that we're required to? In order to get a life table changed by anybody, where does it say that we are required to petition them for a study?
Because
I can tell you right now, you won't find it because there isn't one. We're not required to.
Well, then why
That is
would
the purpose of
Why would
appeals.
you spend all the time and effort to talk to each county 2 years after the fact and say, oh, by the way, you guys should be using 8-year life, not 12? Why didn't you come to us 2 years ago and says, oh, by the way, here's this study we think is right? Now, I can tell you right now, looking at your data, you have data that's easily 10 to 15 years old. BOE would throw this out. They wouldn't even consider it.
Well, the BOE
And
is not
what
here to
you're doing-
testify, so
and
you
what
can't say
you're-
that.
No, we're basically agreeing with what BOE says, okay?
Let me just step in, because I think we're kind of getting bogged down. I think we get the point, again, there's things you guys don't agree on. I think we got it clear, and let's move on to something else.
Okay. Is anybody from the assessor's office familiar with how grocery store equipment is retired? Typically, say for a chain of grocery stores like Vons or Safeway. Is anybody familiar with how it's retired?
You mean from an accounting standpoint? Or
From an accounting standpoint.
From a business standpoint?
From an accounting standpoint.
We're auditors. We do this all day long for a living. We understand where the
Can you
information
explain?
comes from.
Can you explain?
Can I explain what?
Can you explain how this equipment is retired? The process of Vons retiring their equipment.
Why does that matter? I mean, I don't think
That's
it
my
matters.
question. That's my question.
Because basically, when we do an audit, we verify that it is retired or it
That's
is
not
not.
what I'm asking. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, are you familiar with how Vons retires their equipment? You audit them every year, so obviously you agree with the way that they retire their equipment, right?
No, I
have to
don't
have some
agree
kind of
with-
understanding.
I do not agree with the way they retire any of their assets, and I'll tell you why. Is because their books are the worst books I have ever
Okay.
seen in any of my
That's-
30 years of working.
This is kind of my point here.
Okay.
Okay, this is kind of my point. So.
Well,
the-
fix your accounting records, and then we may be able to look at this a different way. But you won't
Okay.
fix your accounting records, you just want to say, oh, why don't you just arbitrarily just drop it down to 8 years? We're not going to do that.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, we're kind of getting off point here, Mike.
That's not what I'm saying.
let's get-
So the grocery store industry and other industries like it, they're notorious for being horrible at recording their retirements. Okay, so when you see equipment that's being reported from 1992 or prior at over $700,000, accounting for maybe a third of their equipment, chances are most of that equipment is not there anymore. They don't have a barcode on every single thing that they acquire to bring into the store so that they can scan it in and scan it out. They don't do that. Okay, it's pretty much an estimate. So any equipment that's older than, say, 8 or 10 years, they're pretty much estimating, and chances are it's an overestimate, okay? So the information that we presented shows costs that are extremely top-heavy, okay? Most of their acquisitions are within the first 5 to 7 or 8 years that are being reported, okay? So if we were actually able to go in there, do a physical inventory of what's in the store, a lot of that equipment on the prior years is going to come off. So let me ask you, when you did your audit of each of these locations, did you actually go in there and do a physical inventory to verify that that 700,000 plus was still there from the older years?
It's on your accounting records.
So how did you conduct your audit? Did you go in there and check off their list, like, okay, this is here, this is here?
We
You sample?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you sample that older equipment to see whether or not it was all there? Did you actually walk
Did you guys
into the
sample
store?
any of them?
Through conversations with the accountants and the store managers, I verified that the equipment that was installed originally, most of it was still there.
Now, are you aware that the people that work in the store aren't responsible for accounting?
Understandably so, but they been there for 22-some years, and they have not seen anything removed, and that's through their knowledge that nothing has been removed significantly.
And again, that goes to my point that just because they're still using it doesn't mean that it has the value that's on the roll. Would you agree to that? Physical life does not equal value. Would you agree with that?
I would disagree with
Say
that.
I have a computer. I got my first computer in 1996. Okay, the computer cost well over $2,000, and it was only a fraction of what a computer today can do. Okay, if I still had that computer and it still worked, would it still be worth $2,000? Would it be worth $1,000?
We're not talking about computers.
not
No, I know,
talking
no,
about
no.
computers.
That's the
And
point.
if you look at our tables,
The
it will
point-
reflect what you're talking
The
about.
point that I'm making is that just because it still works and just because we can still use it, that doesn't mean that it holds the value that you say it does. Does that make sense?
If you
Would you
would
agree
give
with
us
that?
relevant information and up-to-date information, we may be able to look at that. But you bring stuff that's basically 15 years old, I can't utilize that. No one can. And then if your accounting records are incorrect, that's not our problem either. There's a code section that basically
Do you-
say that what's in your accounting records is what's accessible. We assess it.
And that's fine. I'm not arguing with those costs. I'm not arguing with them at all. I'm just saying the chances are the depreciation that should be used is actually more aggressive than what we're asking for. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Now, as far as the age of records goes, do you know when the Iowa curve study was done?
Back in the 30s,
And the state still relies on it, right?
as far as I know, yes.
So we're talking about a study that's, what, 80-plus years old?
You haven't presented anything to
And
the
that's
state
fine.
of
I'm
California.
not arguing with that. I'm not arguing with that, okay? So it's accepted that we can rely on a study that's 80 years old,
And
80,
there's-
80-plus years old.
There's 58
But-
counties that rely on that, and we keep using it, yes. And until industry basically does a better job, we're going to continue using it. Why doesn't industry basically fix their accounting records and do studies? Well, they don't. They just come in here and say, oh, why don't you drop it 8 years? There's no relevant information. You got 10 exhibits here, and there was nothing in here that basically, that we could rely on to adjust anything.
Let me ask a different question.
All right.
If Vons were to close down, say, the store in Oakhurst, and they wanted to sell their equipment, how would they do so?
That's speculation. We're not dealing with speculation.
That's fine. Just
Those
how do you
stores
think
are
they would?
operating. Those
How do you
stores
think
are
they would?
operating, and we assess them as operating stores, and we assess them based upon the factory tables that were relied on from 58 other counties.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that they would only market that sale to stores in Oakhurst? Or would they market that sale only to stores within Madera County?
I would imagine they'd market that sale to the state of California, I'd imagine.
So if they would market the sale to the entire state, then wouldn't information that we have from other counties throughout the state be pertinent?
Not if it's 10, 15 years old, it wouldn't.
But we presented information from 2017 and prior.
No, you
As
presented
far, no,
information
our
starting in 2004.
cost analysis was from 2017 and prior. You said that it wasn't applicable to this case because it was outside of Madera County. But you just said yourself that if they wanted to sell the equipment, they would venture outside the county.
I never said that at all.
Your office did. Somebody at the table there said that.
So in other words, you basically talk to different people and get a different answer, and then you say, okay.
We have one
that's what we should be
assessor.
doing.
We have one assessor, right? Am I right or wrong? We have one assessor. Everybody that works for the assessor's office should speak for the assessor.
We are one class, and we are one department, and we all try to do the same thing, everyone, yes.
Okay, so what I heard is that if they wanted to sell the equipment, they would go outside the county. Is that what I heard?
That's speculation. I don't know
That's
what they
fine.
would do.
That's
I would
fine.
assume
That's
that's
fine.
what they would
I'm
do.
asking for your
But I
opinion.
don't know that for a fact.
I'm just asking for your opinion.
I mean, I wouldn't know that for a fact.
Yeah, that's fine. That
Again, I think the question's been asked and answered. Let's go on. If you about getting close to wrapping this thing up?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm done with the questions.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Austin,
Yes.
let me visit the bottom line again. Your assessed value is 1,244,559.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I forgot, what was the assessees, I think, what they were used? Is that 1.1 million something?
We have it in a couple of different places.
Could you tell me that, what was it?
I don't
For
know.
which location?
Safeway.
Is that the one on Cleveland Avenue?
Yes,
Okay. Do you want the allocation or just the total?
the total.
1,014,470.
And what exhibit is that on?
Exhibit 1, page 3. That's also on Exhibit 5, page 1. But Exhibit 5 shows side by side what the real value is and what the applicant's opinion is.
So on exhibit 5, page 1, you have both addresses of Vons and Safeway Company, and you have the final value of the assessor's office, structure, personal property fixtures, total value on both of the stores at 2.5 million, and your opinion value on both the stores at 1.8 million. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with
That's
their
what
value.
that's what he's asking for. That's what you're asking for and what he's asking for, those numbers.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
uh-huh, yeah.
Just want to make sure we
We're
know.
on the same page?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have a difference of approximately 230,000?
No, it sounded more than that.
More than that?
No, 2.5 million
And
is,
1.8.
is the assessor's value.
Yeah.
Right?
And their value, what they want to do is 1.8 million.
That's about
So
700,000.
what's
It's about
that?
700,000.
700 some odd thousand, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Any other questions?
No question, we ready to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a couple
We
of
would
questions?
have, go ahead.
I'm somewhat confused by this. This 1996 letter from the State Board of Equalization
Yes.
that says you're not supposed to use Assessment Standards Division's, ASD's, internal guidelines. Is that what your appraisal is based upon, Mr. Austin?
No.
Okay, so this letter is basically irrelevant, is what you're saying? Okay.
It's outdated. It's outdated.
That was in his exhibit. That was his exhibit. that
Right,
letter.
but he's using it to say
Let
they
me-
shouldn't
let
be
me-
able to do what they're doing. And you're saying you're not using it, is that correct? Okay, now, what's your
Let me clarify.
position on that?
The Assessment Standards Division was essentially replaced by the CAA, which is what the Assessor's Office is using.
California's
Correct.
Assessors Association.
Correct.
California Assessors
So
Association.
the standards that were in place for the ASD were pretty much carried forward to the CAA. And the guidelines that were set forth for each of the categories that they recommend, it was done using the same methodology, which is basically just opinions and.
That's
and,
incorrect.
work
If-
experience.
Wait a minute,
That's
wait a minute, wait a minute.
incorrect.
Let him finish and then we'll have you speak.
That's it.
Okay, so what's your position on that?
That's incorrect. I can tell you right now that over 30 years, 35 years I've been doing this, there has been constant updates, constant reviews of these life tables from all industries, and we constantly update these. We have meetings twice a year just to discuss this kind of information, and we're constantly updating the information. And we like information from industry, but we can't use stuff that's 10, 15 years old. Just can't do
Yet
it.
Mr. Austin has no.
Hang on just a second,
Okay.
let him finish. Is that it?
I'm sorry, I thought he was done.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there's no supporting documents. There's no evidence saying that it's updated every year. There's nothing showing the research and the analysis that went into the development of these guidelines. He's just saying that it's there, but he hasn't presented it for us to see today.
Okay, where exactly is the 12% number we're talking about? Is it in this paperwork someplace?
Okay, what?
The 12% that you guys are relying on?
12-year.
The
12-year, rather? Is that
12-year
in
line?
these papers someplace?
It's available online.
It is
Wait a
in
minute,
there.
no.
They
Didn't you
submitted
guys,
that.
didn't you guys show that someplace? In some of your- Let me see if I have it in.
5 minutes alive here.
Exhibit A, page 1.
Couple pages, is a page.
You see it?
Page 1?
Next page. Oh, you passed it, right there.
You see it?
You got it.
Okay, and this is by the California Assessors Association,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And that's 12 years you're using.
yes.
Okay, now, maybe you can explain to us, Mr. Buskirk, why they shouldn't be using that.
Because it's used as a guideline. It's simply, that's all it is, it's a guideline. It's a starting point. I mean, we understand that every assessor's office throughout the state has a big job to do as far as valuing all the personal property in their respective counties. You know, so mass appraisal techniques are necessary, but that's just a starting point, okay? They haven't presented any studies that went into the development of these guidelines, but we have presented studies. We have our own study of Vaughn's retirement patterns internally. We have the opinions of industry experts. We've submitted articles from different publications that are involved in the industry saying that using a 12-year table is too conservative. And it's our opinion that just presenting the guideline isn't good enough. You can't just say, well, they tell us to do it, so we do it. Okay, if that's the case, and they're not allowed to deviate from a 12-year table, then there's no point even doing appeals. That's why we're here appealing it. We're saying that even though they did their job correctly, it's still overvalued. Because all we did when we got our tax bill and what we saw when we saw the assessed value is we saw the starting point.
So how did you come up with the specific number you have?
We did our study based on the equipment acquisitions, the trends over the years from Vaughn's and Safeway, like I said, through just this county, through the north and south regions, throughout the state. And we saw the acquisition and retirement patterns that coincided with the R3 curve, where they coincided and which table they coincided with. So based on the shape of the R3 curve, which is what's used by the BOE, we found that an 8-year table is more appropriate for valuing this type of equipment.
And that's what you use to make your calculation?
And that's what we use. So we use the factors from the same source. It's just a different service life that we looked at. We're not looking at just one location. You're going to have outliers. They have, like I said, about 400 stores, so there's going to be outliers. There's going to be locations that deviate from the norm, but the market tells us that on average, this equipment is in service for anywhere between 7 and 10 years, and we used an 8-year table.
Thank you. That's all
But
the questions I have.
if I could make a comment on that, during my audit, I had requested that information, their study and their procedures and lifing study for their equipment. It was not available to me at that time during my audit, and it was requested.
Okay, thank you.
And that was, what, 2014? 2014.
That's all I had.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just in response to that, I wasn't involved in 2014, so I don't know. I can't speak to what happened at that time.
Okay, any further questions from the panel?
No.
Okay. At this time, then, we'll recess this hearing, and we will conduct our discussions and come back and with findings.
Will we have closing arguments or no?
What's that?
Will we have closing arguments? Well, I wasn't sure if that was part of procedure here. Every county's kind of different.
Yeah, if you want to make some closing arguments, that's fine, and Mr. Austin will get to make some also, so.
Okay. I just wanted to start off by saying that there's Property Tax Rule 321. I'm sure everybody here is at least somewhat familiar with it, but it requires the board to determine, I'll quote this, to determine whether it has been established by a preponderance of the evidence that the assessor's determination is incorrect. The presumption that the assessor has properly performed his or her duties is not evidence and shall not be considered by the board in its deliberations. Okay, so Rule 321 simply sets the standard at a preponderance of the evidence. Who's 51% right versus 49%? Okay, we've presented studies. We've presented a study on the acquisition patterns for Vaughn's and Safeway. We've presented industry information. We've presented letters that we've received from experts and participants in the industry, both in the grocery stores themselves, as well as in the equipment manufacturers, okay? We presented all this information. We presented auction sales to show exactly what this equipment sells for, and we believe that we've met that burden. We've shown that a 12-year table is far too conservative. And what the assessor has proven is simply that our client complies with their requirement to file. That's all they've proven. They've shown the property statements that they've filed each year. They've shown that our client gets a property statement, they fill it out, they return it, and that's it. Just, you know, the simple fact that they comply with this requirement to file their property statement, it doesn't determine value. They haven't proven what the average service life of this equipment is. They haven't proven how much it can actually sell for on the open market. They've shown that they have a guideline to follow to value this equipment on a 12-year table, and they've shown that our client complies with their requirement to file, and that's it. So it's our opinion that after hearing all these arguments today, that we've met that preponderance of the evidence standard for the board to consider. So with that, I guess we'll rest our case.
Mr. Austin?
Yeah, basically, we believe that the taxpayer has not met the burden of proof or preponderance of evidence. Utilizing data that's roughly 15 years old is not a good enough reason for us to adjust our tables based upon what 58 other counties do up and down the state of California. Another issue is, as R&T Code Section 1610.8, it basically says an application for a reduction in assessment on a local roll shall establish the full value of the property by independent evidence. There was no independent evidence that the taxpayer has presented us today in regards to the viability of a life table that's less than a 12-year life established for literally the last at least 10 years that I'm aware of, a 12-year life. So we stand on the state of California and the Assessors Association guidelines of utilizing a 12-year life, and we do this on not only the Vons and Safeway stores, but all the other stores in this county. And I can almost guarantee you that other 58 counties in the state of California do it the same way. And we will stand on that. Do you have any?
Yes, I do. The applicant has presented acquisitions patterns, but no evidence of disposal pattern to the specific store. Maybe others that they presented, but not to these specific ones. Secondly, auction sales should not be considered value for property tax purposes. It doesn't address all that goes in to put it in place for use and going concerns of the business. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Okay, well, without any further comments from the board, what we'll do is we'll recess and take the matter under consideration. And before we actually go back and recess, I would like to bring one other item on the agenda out and take care of it. This is the makeup of the board for next year. Okay? And we've had multiple discussions on it, and it seems to me that the consensus is for next year that I, John Minnie, would continue as the chairman of the board for next year. Betty Gonzalez would be the vice chairman of the board, and Pete Najjar would be the third permanent member of the board. Bob Rowe and John Reed would be the two alternate members. So if someone wants to make a motion or a discussion of it, please go ahead.
I so move. Second it.
It's been moved and seconded, and so I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. And the motion passes. Okay, we're going to adjourn to the, or not adjourn, but recess to the conference room.
Excuse me, are we going to come back in 15 minutes to do the rest of the agenda? Or, because there's a lot left to go.
Not left, okay? I don't know.
We can take a break and then
Let
come
me
back.
get you, would you rather do that first or not? I'm open either way.
Yeah, I don't care either way.
Okay, we'll go ahead, and I'm sorry, we will not recess to the room. We'll go ahead and take the rest of your agenda.
Oh, okay, thank you very much, I
I
appreciate
stand
that.
corrected.
I appreciate that, yes.
You don't want to be sitting here at 8 o'clock tonight?
Yeah, no, I do not.
Are those
No,
guys
no,
coming
no.
out of there? Okay. Okay, where am I? That's the wrong month. Gotta get it out. Okay, next is 5C, hearing for Greenleaf Orchards LTD, 17R025. And we have received a request to continue pending receipt of stipulation of assessed value. So I assume you've basically come to a stipulated agreement, you just don't have the paper yet.
Yes, we have. We sent out the paperwork, I believe, last
Yep.
Thursday, I believe. We got a confirmation from the taxpayer that they got it, and they agreed to it, and they said they sent it back to us. We have not got that back yet.
Yeah,
So we're waiting on that. I'd like to ask for a postponement of 30 days so we can
Yeah.
get that and put it on the next agenda.
Okay, any comments from the board? No? How about a motion? Anybody want to make a motion? Continue to January 3rd?
Are we going to make motion for each one of these, or we can do?
I think we have to go through them one at a time. Yeah.
All right, I make a motion that we move this item 17R025 to the next meeting, which is in January.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. On your list, was 4508 on there?
4508 is, right, that's the next, that was the next one we did, 4507.
Yeah, now we're looking at 4508, hearing for the Orchards, 17R026. Is that the second one on your sheet? And what does that say? Let me look at it.
Same thing.
Okay, same thing. Mr. Austin?
Yes, number 4508, 5D. Yes, we'd like to postpone that to January 3rd, 2018, because we sent off the agreement, the stipulation of value, and we have not received it back. So we need to postpone it to January 3rd, 2018 to get the required paperwork. 19, excuse me, yes, 19.
So we have a motion on that?
Yeah, I move that we postpone item number 4508, hearing for the Orchards LLC 17R026.
To,
To January.
and second, we have motion and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I think we've got several of them next that are in the same group. Maybe Mr. Austin can tell us what group that is.
Yes, 5E and 5F, Carolyn Zlotnick and Bradley Zlotnick are all represented by Bradley Zlotnick, and we can put these together and discuss these, yes.
Where are we at on them?
I got an email yesterday, day before yesterday, and Bradley Zlotnick has had several deaths in his family, his immediate family, and they just recently happened, and he asked for a postponement. I do not have a problem with postponing things
Okay.
when something like that happens.
Okay.
you know. you don't-
Did he suggest a date, 1 month, 2 months? I mean, if he's got
You know,
several deaths,
I would imagine, let's give them 2 months.
yeah, let's give him February.
I don't think I don't think he suggested it in,
Right.
in, the,
recall making a suggestion. I think he thought that everything was just going to be closed because he didn't get back to him right away.
Mm,
right.
And so I think that was his concern, so he didn't realize he had a date choice.
mhm.
Right.
Yeah. But
I think we should give him 60 days,
Okay.
you know, the holidays, and then give him
Yeah.
another 30 days because of the problems. It is it's 2 lots in Chowchilla, and we have sent him all of our data, and he's trying to do the comparability analysis, and, you know, all this stuff happened just
Yeah.
recently. I mean, just recently. So yes, let's postpone these until February the 3rd, or what day would it be? February 7th, 2019. 5E and 5F.
All right, any comments from the members of the board? I'd entertain a motion then.
I make a motion that we move item 17R027 and 17R028 to the February meeting.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. A call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, looks like we got a bunch of Ratcliffe hearings here.
Yes.
Does that O'Halloran run in with Ratcliffe?
Yes.
Okay.
Halloran is like a brother-in-law or
An
something
in-law,
like that.
okay.
Yeah, an in-law or something,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
And
so-
so 5G, 5H, 5I, 5J, 5K, 5L, and 5M is all the same
Yeah.
people.
Okay, and what's the story here?
Okay, he emailed me on December 4th, which is Tuesday, and said, I am so sorry, I have a conflict with the 12/6/2018 date. We, meaning him and his wife, moving from Los Gatos to El Dorado Hills on 12/6/2018, which is today, and I have to be in Los Gatos with my wife to coordinate the movers. Is it all possible to finish this up without involving the formal appeal in person? And I told him, I said, well, I said, you need to be here, but if you're asking for a postponement, I don't see a problem with postponing something because he did email us, but if we're moving, it looked like to me that you would know when you was moving at least a month before to tell us, hey, you know, we can't make it or whatever, can we postpone it again? We have been postponing these,
Yeah.
I think it's like since June, every other month, if I can remember right.
his
Are we
first
getting
hearing
anywhere
was-
near a need to stipulate the waive time?
His first hearing was October 4th of this year.
Okay, so,
2018, yeah. So you're talking, what, 3 months? Let's do it. Preferably, I think we should give him a postponement. I don't see a problem with it, however, I think he would have known that he was going to move this day.
well,
It looked like to me, so, I mean, it's up to you, you gentlemen. But in my opinion, I think we just deny these because he would have known that.
yeah.
He should have known.
I-
But it's up to you folks.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't sound egregious to me, you know. He did contact us and say he is moving, and I don't dispute that he is, and it just didn't get the date right, so
And that
my
happens.
tendency would be to give it to him, you
And that
know.
happens, you know.
Yeah, it's got to be more, you know,
Yeah. I would think, why don't we push it out to like
Yeah.
February 7th, 2019?
Okay.
And, you know,
Yeah.
I'll get a hold of him and talk to him and find out what we can
Yeah.
resolve, you know?
Is there a chance you get a stipulation on this, or, stipulated agreement or
At the
something?
present time, we're pretty far apart.
Oh, okay, all right, so this is going to be a hearing, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I would entertain a motion to move those to the February hearing.
Okay, I make a motion that we move item 17R 044, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, and 50 to the February hearing,
I second that. February 7th.
February 7th,
February 7th.
yeah.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we continue these. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next two items look like they go together, Mammoth Mountain, and we're talking about continuing the hearing again. I know we've talked about this at length at other, meetings. So, Mr. Austin, you can probably briefly bring us up to date. I assume that it's the same things going on.
Yes, matter of fact, we've been emailing each other and we've talked on the phone. And I've actually talked with the assessor of Mono County, and he, meaning the attorney for Mammoth Mountain, believes that they may be able to resolve their issues or have a hearing in like April or prior. And so I suggested a May 2nd, 2019, and I wrote him an email and says, that we are not going to allow any more postponements. This has been going on way too long. There's a 2014 hearing and a 15 hearing, and there's 2016 outstanding. And we have the 2016 hearing on the agenda scheduled for May 2nd, 2019 also. So we'll be able to hear all three of them at the same time. And I'm hoping that they can resolve their issues with Mono County, but if they can't, we still have our allocation of our, I think it's 4%, I think, because we use the same information, okay? So I wrote them a letter and said, the May 2nd, 2019 is we're not going to agree to any more requests of postponements. It's been going on way too long.
Yeah, well, it just seems to me that if those guys get resolved, then ours is much easier to resolve. It simplifies our job much better. So, any questions, comments from the board? Okay, how about a motion?
I move that we move the meeting from 14R083 and 15R045 to May 2nd, 2019.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the hearings. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Austin, you think what you've sent this fellow is adequate notice that if we get to May 2 and they're not resolved with Mono, and they don't show up here, we can take their default?
Yes,
Okay,
that's what we will do.
thank you.
Okay, next item is stipulation of assessed value, R17R029. Total assessed value, $606,253. Mr. Austin?
Yeah, Mike Austin, Chief Appraiser for the County of Madera. We have a stipulation of value. We received November the 8th, 2018, for appeal number 17R029. And the values are for assessor's parcel number 049022018, appeal 17R029. Final land value 375,488. Final structures 151,363. Final growing improvements $34,400. Final fixtures $49,002 for a total value $606,253. So we want you to uphold these values for the appeal.
Okay, any comments from the board?
Question, what is this property?
This is a farm, hold on. This is, yeah, this is a farm. And that's all the information I have on it. But we agree with the 606,253. We did have a value of 806,580 on it, so we agree to lower it to 606,253 based upon comparable sales of similar properties.
Let's take a look at this is Walker. Avenue 12, it's on Avenue 12, 39 and Avenue 12.
How many acres is that?
I don't know if it says. How many, you know how many acres it is, Mr. Austin?
I don't have any other information on it at all.
I got 39,653 Avenue 12 on it.
Hold on. 20.13 acres.
20.12 acres. Is it currently a house there or what? Or bare land? I see improvements in structures are, you know,
Yes.
the main thing on the value, so.
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't have any more information than the tax bill that I'm looking at. It's got a location, address is 39653 Avenue 12.
Yeah.
The taxpayer lives at 3585 West Beechwood Avenue, Suite 104 in Fresno, California, 93711. I do not know that. And usually I have
I think
information.
39 and 12, boy. I drive by it all the time. I just don't know which one it is.
Well, it would be nice to have a little bit information, especially when we are assessing the value and we are bring it for approval. And
We can postpone it and I can get that information for you. I mean, that would be the most prudent and reasonable thing. I usually have information in these files, but for some reason or other, there's nothing in the file.
Also, like last time, I requested that the postponements that we are receiving should have a original date of application and how many times it has been continued. If that's provided, then that helps us how long it has been going on.
And Sarah has been given that information out.
It has been provided, it is always on.
I had a conversation with Mr. Sawanda too on this, that we should have some control on this, on postponements.
Oh, yes,
We
definitely.
should know how long it's been going on, how old it is, how many times we already given the extension. And if it's agreeable with the other members, I think we should put it like a number that after 3 hearings or 3 postponements, the candidate has to appear here in person or it would be denied. And they have to come here and say, why we need extension, give some reasons. Otherwise, they just sit home and make a phone call that postpone and we waste our time here. So
I agree.
we are paid heavily for this.
Okay,
Sarah, did you have that information?
on the Walker thing, what is your?
I guess, as whatever your decision is, Mr. Chairman.
Let's
if
postpone
you
it. I
like.
mean,
Wait,
you
wait.
guys need the information. I will get that information.
Mr. Austin, this is a stipulation, right?
Yes.
The assessor has agreed to it, the taxpayer has agreed to it. Okay, just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess there is no dispute.
But
That's-
the board needs to know some specifics, and I think it's reasonable to inform the board of the specifics
Yeah.
so they can basically make a informed decision when they're agreeing to it.
Yeah, we have no objection, so we would continue it to the next month's hearing.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion on item 17R029, that it be continued to the next meeting of January 3rd.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the 17R029. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I think everything else has been covered, and we can now recess to the conference.
Okay, before everyone goes, Sarah, were you going to tell the board where to find the information about the postponements? I'll show them in the closed session. Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies, appreciate it. What's that?
We're good to go? Okay, it is 2:50, and we are back in session. We have two items to cover. The first one will be the first one we heard. We did the discussion and consideration of postponed hearings for Constellation Brand U.S. Operations 95R027 and 96R100, scheduled for December 13, 14, and 19, 2018. Would any member of the board care to make a motion on that?
Yes, I will make a motion that we deny the postponement of this Constellation Brands hearing, item number 95R027, 96R100, and continue the hearing on December 13th, 14th, and 19th, 2018.
Just let me amend by saying continue the hearing, you mean go forward with the hearing.
I'm
right?
sorry, let me correct myself.
No, I know what you meant, I just want to make sure the record.
That we will hold the hearings on December 13th, 14th, and 19th.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
Let me ask, what's the plan for giving notice to Troy is what happened?
I'll send them in a minute order when we're done today.
Today, you're going to send that out?
I will send it out today.
Thank you.
What was the other one?
The Safeway and Vons. The Safeway and Vons, item number 5.
5A and 5B.
Okay, we have we heard the hearings for Safeway and Vons. We combined those two, 17R015 and 17R016. And would a member of the board care to make a motion?
Okay. I make a motion on item number 17R015 and 17R016 is a Safeway and Vons companies. And I make a motion that we accept the value as compiled by the assessors. It's in the range of about 2.5 million. And we should go ahead and accept that as the assessed value.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the assessor's value on items 17R015 and 17R016. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Do we have any other comments, staff reports, agenda, miscellaneous needs to be discussed?
The only thing we need to discuss is how we go about I think it's John Lawson and Concrete Construction Company, the airplane, that we have findings of fact for?
You guys have
That-
prepared a draft finding of facts, isn't it?
The
That would
assessor's
be
office-
for Appeal 17S011 with Central Valley Concrete.
Yeah. Right. And the assessor's office was going to prepare draft findings of facts for the board to review.
We have completed the proposed draft findings.
Yeah.
And this morning, I sent our proposed draft findings to Mike Linden, the county council. And the next step, I believe, is to send those proposed findings out to the appellant to get his input and give them a specific date to
I-
get back to us.
My preference would be that we see them next and before the appellant.
That's fine too?
Yeah, because in case, I would feel more comfortable with that, you know.
That's fine? Okay. I will send them to Mike. I think I already sent them to Mike Ott, I believe.
I don't know, I've been in the office last.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we've been here, so.
And then, would you distribute them to the members then, or would Sarah, or how is that?
I'll send them to Sarah if she doesn't already have them, then she can.
Yes. Yeah.
I sent them the day before I came down here.
So what is the board,
No, today. Oh, yeah, I did?
what is the board's preference? What is the board's preference with respect to once they're in your possession? Because at some point, we need to give the taxpayer a chance.
Well, at that point, we need to have each of the board members look at it and, you know, make any proposed amendments to the draft. And then if there is significant ones, then we'll have to come to our next board meeting and, you know, adjourn and discuss it in the conference room, how we, you know, to finalize the findings of facts. And then once we have a draft final, I would send that to the appellant. That's where I would go.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay?
So
So
the next
to,
thing that happens is the board will meet and discuss this in January?
No, you will email it to the members of the
No, I'm
board.
sorry, okay. But the next thing that happens with respect to the preparation of the findings is the board will discuss that at the next meeting? Or what will we do in the interim is the question.
Okay. What I anticipate the board will do will be to have comments on those. And depending on how significant the comments are, we may or may not have to discuss them at the next meeting, but we would run them by you. You could review them and tell us whether or not we need to sit down and, you know, hash it out.
Okay? So nothing to the taxpayer at this point?
No, then when we finalize our draft, that's when I would send it to the taxpayer.
Yes. It's good with me, good with us. Sarah, good with you?
I'm confused.
When you get it, send it to us. That's,
Right, okay, so I'm just trying to figure out timelines because, you know, we're gonna have the Christmas holidays, and then if it's gonna go on the agenda, I need to know and well in enough advance that we're gonna need to discuss it on the January 3rd agenda, right? So I'm just trying to get my timelines,
It needs to be on the January 3rd agenda.
so we will have it
sent-
on the January 3rd
I sent you
agenda.
some language late last month about putting something on this.
Yes,
agenda.
I'm sorry, I was in
You can
San
just use that-
Diego.
You can just use that language to put on for January 3.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, that sounds like everybody's had their say, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second it.
Moved and seconded, we adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes, we're adjourned.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
On the 13th.
And we'll see everybody on the 13th.
Vote no on that.
Happy holidays.
Yes, you too.